Welcome back to the channel. This is Trendy Storm and you are watching first part of What If Naruto fought Demons of Another World. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share and subscribe to this channel. Not wasting no time, let's start the story.
Although there are many different types of evil, none have ever been as potent as the prime evils. They were Hell's very own lords. Each of the three unworldly powerful demons known as the prime evils had ways of corrupting and destroying mortal souls. However, they weren't content with simply controlling their own territory, as evil was and still is. They aimed to subjugate and control everything, including the human world and the walls of heaven. Good is inherently kind and depends on nuanced non-interference techniques by her own hand. Kami is largely content to let humanity navigate difficult times on its own, but that didn't mean her angels couldn't do anything if people of demonic origin attacked people directly. This hand was responsible for the War of Sanctuary. One of the human realms was Sanctuary, where a wide variety of magics and weapons were in use. Evil only existed in the hearts of a select few in this breathtakingly beautiful place, but for the prime evils, this world was just the first of many to be subjugated. At first, the forces of mankind lost battle after battle because they were unable to stop the assault of Hell's forces. It was a while before humanity swallowed its pride and began cooperating. The mage clans were the first to come together. The clans' incapacity to cooperate made it difficult for them to combat the prime evils. Despite their remarkable ability to control the elemental forces of fire, ice, and lightning, Horizon was able to bring the mage clans together to form the Horadrim after a protracted battle, but they sought allies against Hell's armies because they knew that their strength alone would not be sufficient to change the situation. The Druid and Barbarian clans from the far west's mountains provided assistance. Although they were slightly different, both clans were excellent warriors. Combat, honor, and glory were the barbarians' lifebloods. They were able to carry enormous swords in each hand and wear enormous sets of armor due to their extraordinary strength and stamina. They were renowned for their ability to cut through sizable portions of the opposition with their two-sword fighting style. They were also proficient with all weapons, so they could readily exploit any weapon they came across on the battlefield. Druids lived to be in harmony with nature. Unlike their former brethren, Druid had the power to summon the land's beasts and control the winds and earth, including fire from the earth's core. Those druids who were so attuned to the animal kingdom were even capable of transforming into beasts and using their strength to battle. From the foot of Mount Ariad eastward to the city of Travincal in the nation of Karast, their combined might drove the armies of Mephisto, Lord of Hatred, and Baal, Lord of Destruction. There, the priests and knights of Zakaram, also called paladins, were able to unite with the combined Horadrim and barbaric druidic alliance force. With its blessings, they were able to protect others and exercise holy powers together. They were able to capture Mephisto and seal him inside the first soulstone of the Temple of Zakaram. The Archangel Tyrael gave the soulstones to humanity after his counterpart, the Archangel Isuel, found them. The power and souls of the three could be bound by these stones, preventing humanity from being influenced by them. Baal withdrew across the ocean to the lands of the east, where he allied himself with his brother Diablo, Lord of Terror. After part of their forces were destroyed to guard the temple, the Zakaram priests and knights remained. Additionally, the barbaric druidic alliance remained to guard Mount Ariad because the summit held a valuable treasure. After that, the Horadrim's forces looked for a new ally and were able to negotiate a treaty with the large Amazonian tribes in the eastern plains. These were very tall women who could bind elemental powers to their javelins and bows. They were able to repel the Diablo and Baal forces thanks to their accuracy and speed. Horizon and another great mage, Tal Rasha, were able to free Baal from his army following a fierce battle in the desert outside the oasis of Lud Goline in order to bind Baal and imprison him inside one of the caverns in the Canyon of the Magi, which are only reachable via Horizon's arcane sanctuary. Tyrael then lent him another soulstone, but there was a price for it. Tal Rasha had to remain in order to help keep the tombs sealed and keep Baal inside the soulstone. Diablo was driven back by the combined power of the Horadrim, the Amazon, and other adventurers along the way, as Hell's forces were reduced to a third of their former strength outside the village of Tristram, in the catacombs beneath the church. Diablo made his final stand and collapsed. Diablo was imprisoned inside the last soulstone in the catacombs. A portion of the Amazon and Horadrim remained to support Tristram's native troops. But the Archangel Isuel, Tyrael's own ally, tricked him in the early phases of the conflict. Isuel was Tyrael's most reliable ally. Isuel, however, desired to lead a direct attack on Hell itself in order to drive out the remaining prime evils prior to Mephisto's defeat. Tyrael declined, saying he would not go directly after Hell's forces but would only help mankind win. Isuel attempted to lead the attack alone but was defeated because he felt deceived by someone he had once considered a brother. Tyrell was unaware that the three had transformed Isuel and that this was how the soul stones came to be. They could directly affect mankind because the three's essence was sealed in the stones. Free will was both humanity's greatest asset and its greatest weakness. Being aware of this, humanity could be steered away from the light of good and toward the darkness of evil by the three's direct influence. This began in Tristram and began to take shape over the course of a century. Strange creatures began to emerge from the catacombs, and local residents went missing. The Diablo-spawned minions destroyed the majority of Tristram's army. But Tristram was never completely destroyed. In order to find out what caused the minions, the town elders, under the leadership of an elderly Horadric mage named Deckard Cain, sought out adventurers. One lone wanderer found Diablo after many other adventurers failed. After defeating Diablo, the wanderer took away the soul stone, but after being exposed to the soul stone for a long time, the spirit of Diablo took possession of him. A few months later, a dark wanderer headed west after Tristram fell. It was during this time that the wanderer and the other soul stones began to corrupt the original allies. To stop this evil from spreading, however, groups of adventurers united. A group of 5 adventurers, including a tall, blonde Amazon marksman named Mia, a muscular, red-headed male druid named Beric, a dark-skinned, nobleman named Anstrom, a paladin, a voluptuous, raven-haired sorceress named Celine, and a quiet brunette assassin named Alexia, were one such group. When the Horadrim rebelled against the pressures of avarice and small-mindedness, the Assassin Guild was born. Assassins received training in traps, martial arts, and controlling shadow forces. They extended their bodies with blades and claws strapped to their forearms and wrists. Assassins could use mental attacks, imbue the claws with elemental energy, and even create a solid clone. After extensive training, these skills were refined so that any proficient sorceress or mage who turned away from the light could be defeated by an assassin. Despite their initial disagreements, Celine and Alexia eventually came to trust one another. As a result of their shared experiences at the party, they defeated those corrupted souls and many of the minions from the pits of hell alongside Beric, Mia, and Anstrom. Their most difficult test, however, began when they learned of a dark nomad who was traveling west and causing terror and corruption in his wake. The 5 searched the Amazon plains and headed to Tristram, arriving first at a renegade Amazonian camp. They brought Deckard Cain back to the camp after rescuing him from Diablo's henchmen. He described how Diablo enchanted the nomad, destroying the village, imprisoning him, and then heading west to rescue his brothers. However, they were unable to pursue because the demoness Andariel, one of Diablo's generals, had taken control of many of the Amazons and was besieging the area. The 5 fought their way to a monastery that the demon was using as a command center, and they vowed to free Mia's fellow citizens. The group pursued the dark nomad to the city of Lut Goline after vanquishing the demoness Andariel. Regretfully, the corruption that originated from the soulstone in the region also affected the desert's jewel. Although the group succeeded in rescuing the city from the demon Duriel's army of minions, they were unable to prevent the wanderer from releasing Baal from his captivity. Tal Rasha, a mage, was already under Baal's control, and his extensive magics were added to Baal's already evil abilities. The two traveled across the ocean to Karast, which was already under the influence of Mephisto, the Lord of Hatred, and his spell of hatred. Leading the group, Anstrom trailed Baal and Diablo around Karast at the Temple of Zakaram. They were able to defeat the Lord of Hatred and acquire his blue soulstone. The group was then led by Tyrell to the Pandemonium Fortress, an angelic outpost located just outside Hell's actual gates. The group entered Hell and fought their way through, defeating Diablo and Isuel before snatching his red soulstone. They even believed they had destroyed the soulstones and secured the Hell Forge. But it was all for nothing. Baal led his army up the slopes of Mount Ariad during the time Diablo allotted. Naturally, the group followed, and from the barbarian stronghold of Harrogath, they launched counterattacks. Deckard Cain learned that the barbarian clans, along with their ancients, were tasked with protecting the Worldstone, which was located inside a keep at the top of Mount Ariad. Because the ancients were such famous warriors, Kami gave them the gift of eternal life and assigned them to guard the keep's gate. Young barbarian warriors would ascend to the summit and face a trial against the ancients themselves as part of a rite of passage, because barbarian clans considered the ancients to be their gods. Unless a ward maintained by the elders of Harrogath was employed, no one could enter the keep without defeating the ancients. Nilithic, one of those aforementioned elders, betrayed humanity by handing over the ward to Baal, who was able to avoid the ancients. Despite their best efforts, the group passed the ancients' trial and proceeded through the keep to the throne room. While he waited, Baal dispatched his generals to crush the group one wave after another. Baal withdrew to the Worldstone chamber because it was insufficient to overcome the power of light. The yellow soulstone was left behind when Baal was vanquished and his body liquefied following a protracted and exhausting battle. The Worldstone chamber. The team was exhausted and hungry. They arrived at this final battle within the sacred walls of the Worldstone Chamber after a protracted journey of conflict and hardship. Ball was a cunning jerk who used his appendages, life-leeching fire breath, and mana-leeching ice waves to keep the group at bay once he began to accumulate damage. He even succeeded in creating a duplicate of himself, but between Anstrom's holy auras, Mia's barrage of arrows, and Barach's werewolf claws and bear companion, Ball was severely injured and rapidly losing strength. Alexia nodded to Celine, sensing a gap and preparing a coordinated assault concentrating her mana. Selena hurled a flurry of frozen orbs at Ball, each one spinning wildly and releasing icicles with each spin as the orbs struck Ball. Alexia launched into a dragonflight kick and charged electrical energy into her right foot. Beneath the cover of the orbs she vanished from view and then reappeared with great force at the point of impact, giving the greatest of the prime evils the death blow. The group sighed as the great demon lord vanished. The crunch of Barach's transformation back into a human was nauseating. He sent his bear companion home after giving him a slab of meat from his pack. The room began to rumble as the bear vanished. Mia complained, notching an arrow in her longbow, as if things couldn't get any worse. Anybody know what's going on? Celine? Anstrom hurried to Celine's side as she closed her eyes and focused, then instantly collapsed to her knees. As he assisted her in standing, Anstrom inquired, "What happened, my lady? What did you sense?" Celine complained with a groan, "Massive chaotic energies are swirling. It feels like everything is tearing apart." The ferocious Barach gave a deep growl. "I sense it too. I feel the complaints from my animal brethren, though the link it seems they are afraid." "Afraid of what, Barach?" Alexia inquired inquisitively as she scanned the area for potential enemies. Grimly, he said, "Nature itself. It seems everything is falling apart. Were we too late?" A being with a heavenly presence entered the room as a white light suddenly filled it. A hooded figure, glistening in the light, landed close to the Worldstone's ruby walkway like ribbon wings. Streams of energy flitted from his back. A strange aura emanated from the large sword he carried. Since they had previously met him, everyone in the room recognized him right away. Tyrael's loud voice reverberated throughout the large room. "We are too late to save the Worldstone because Ball's destructive touch has totally corrupted it, but I am impressed. Mortals, you have vanquished the final of the prime evils and surmounted the greatest obstacle this world has ever encountered. The Worldstone's energies will eventually run out and the barriers between the worlds will collapse, allowing Hell's forces to pour into this sanctuary and destroy your people and everything you've worked so hard to create. The only way to guarantee the survival of mankind is for me to destroy the corrupted Worldstone before the forces of Hell take root. This action will alter your world forever and have repercussions that even I cannot predict. The eternal light will shine upon you and your descendants for what you have done today. Above all, you have earned a rest from the never-ending battle. Go now. Mortals, I have opened a portal that will lead you to safety." Tyrael's words caused a portal to open, glimmering with red energy. With a nod, the group made one final search for anything valuable to bring with them. One by one, the group passed through Tyrael's portal, finding nothing but a handful of gold coins. Alexia turned to Tyrael, who looked back at her and gave her a small nod as he began a prayer that would endow his sword with the ability to break the Worldstone. Knowing that things would never be the same, Alexia shed a single tear before entering the portal. A portal would typically close after the final user had gone through its apex. Unfortunately, the yellow crystal that lay at the edge of the portal went unnoticed. Tyrael completed his prayer and swung his sword in a pinwheel motion. As the crystal glowed and gained strength, the Worldstone broke as the massive sword embedded itself in it. After grabbing two pieces of the Worldstone, the yellow crystal transformed into a red and blue crystal before falling into the portal. Tyrael hung his head, sensing an increasing aura of evil. As the portal closed, he was aware that Ball had escaped once more and that their attempts to keep Hell's forces out of this realm had been in vain. Another realm was at risk. Now swiftly leaving the chamber, Tyrael reappeared before Deckard Cain in Harrogath. This was the end of the road for the elderly Horadric mage. He was aware that the end times were near when he felt the world's energies ebbing away and the constant tremors coming from the ground beneath his feet. He feared that the world was destined for eternal darkness and that the light had lost the war against Ball. After saying a brief prayer for his soul and the souls of everyone he encountered while traveling, he waited to see what would happen. Thankfully, fate can change its mind. A loud, regal voice told Deckard Cain, "Don't give up, you still have time. I have more work for you, my friend." Cain turned and sighed with relief as he saw Tyrael's majestic face. "What is asked of me now?" It appears that Ball and his brothers have eluded their fate and corrupted the Worldstone. This realm is changing, however. It seems that the three followed the heroes that defeated them to another realm where I sent the heroes to rest. They will need your guidance again. Cain waved his hand to reveal a red portal, and he knew right away that it was for him. He sighed as he approached the portal and entered, but not before muttering his parting words for this world. "I really need to get a desk job or a warm bed next time." Tyrael sighed, climbed back to the heavenly plane, and began looking for the precise location of the Lords of Hell's journey, as well as any heroes who might be present to aid in the battle. Village of Konoha. When someone you knew passed away, it was always the most humble of days. It was the Sarutobi clan's second funeral in 3 years, according to everyone in attendance. This one was for Asuma, the Sandaime Hokage's son, while the first was for him. Like the previous funeral, everyone was there in somber remembrance and dressed in black. An adolescent boy with blue eyes, blonde hair, and facial marks resembling whiskers stood there, hardly suppressing his tears as before. A young boy with brown hair, wearing his hair in a loose ponytail, stood beside him. He was crying over the death of his entire remaining family while wiping his eyes and muttering his uncle Asuma's name. A dazzling red flash erupted from the sky just as the teenager was ready to comfort the remaining members of the Sarutobi clan. All of them protected their eyes from the illumination together with the other members of the funeral party. The blonde teen looked up as it faded and saw 3 streaks of yellow, red, and blue dance across the sky before vanishing into the distance. When the Sarutobi heir had recovered from his tears, he sniffled and asked, "Naruto Nisan, what do you think that was?" Gloomily, Naruto said, "I have no idea, Konohamaru. Maybe it was an omen." The young boy approached his blonde rival and peered to see if his face had anything noteworthy on it. He briefly noticed a serious expression of worry on the blonde's face, but then Naruto turned to face his friend again and flashed a smile. "Don't worry, Konohamaru, it probably was a good omen. I bet it meant we will take down those bastards and we will live out our dreams," Naruto said with a grin. "Are you sure, Nisan? Those guys that took Asuma away were very tough, from what I heard." Naruto confidently answered, "Don't worry, it is nothing a future Hokage can't defeat." On the inside, though, Naruto did not feel as confident as he claimed. He felt a chill creep into his body and was frightened for the second time since he had put on his Konoha Hite 8. The ramen stand in Ichiraku. After the funeral, Naruto's only thought, for whatever reason, was to visit his favorite ramen stand, but not to eat naturally. Tuchi, the owner, would likely eat a bowl or two if he or his daughter Ayame were present. But the sense of dread that surrounded him worried him, and he needed to talk to friends about it. For heaven's sake, he thought the ramen stand was a good place to start, but he could have gone to his senseis, Uruka or Kakashi, or even his renegade master Jiraiya. "Anyo," I said, "at least I'll get a warm bowl of ramen and a friendly face. There's nothing like a bowl of kami-spawned goodness to lift your spirits," Naruto thought. He saw that the old stand was empty as he got closer. Unusual. It never occurred to me that they would be closing today. He sighed and turned back to his apartment, saying, "I would have sworn they would reopen after the funeral. Perhaps I can go change out of these gloomy robes at least." His feet propelled him to the stools inside the ramen stand as the pull reached him once more. "Well, what is this? Why can't I simply return home? Why am I drawn here?" he thought to himself. A dark voice inside his head answered, "I am, and who is this?" "Kit, who else is in your head?" When Naruto realized who was speaking to him, he swallowed. His body was inhabited by only one other entity. It was the source of his healing abilities, the reason he was despised and mocked by the villagers, and the bane of his life from birth, the actual 9-tailed fox. When Naruto arrived at the storefront, he discovered the door was unlocked. With the help of the fox's mind, his body entered on its own initiative and moved to a seat in the far back. He went into a trance as soon as his body was seated, and a big golden cage appeared in front of his mind. The hallway leading to the room was musty and dark, and the lock was sealed with a paper seal. Water was on the floor and the pipes lining the walls were dripping on each previous trip, but this time the area was dry. "Kid, nice to see you again." On the other side of the cage, in front of Naruto, a pair of red slitted eyes spoke in a guttural voice, even though it always is in the worst of circumstances. "Fantastic, it's never enjoyable to see you." With a frustrated tone, Naruto said, "I thought Sasuke got rid of you." Naruto's former teammate Uchiha Sasuke used his Sharingan to draw him in and silence the Great Fox the last time he was in this chamber. "Like that fleshy bag could. How do you think the Uchiha would stop me if the Yondaime couldn't stop me completely?" The fox gave its human host a glare in return. "Alright, then, now tell me why I'm here," Naruto shot back, assuming a resolute fighting stance. "Didn't you sense that presence?" The fox responded with a note of fear in its voice. That was a whole new evil that showed up. The fox gave off a vibe that Naruto sensed. He briefly believed that the evil demon was truly frightened. "Do you find that concerning? This time, you don't sound as menacing as usual." "I'm not as scared or anxious as you might believe. In fact, I'm worried." The fox suddenly turned to face the ceiling. Those 3 streaks carried the evil that we sensed, and even though they were so far away, their entire aura was enough to saturate the air with its stench. I'm going to end this conversation as it looks like we have company. If this new evil is going to throw the balance off, we will need to talk again. Now leave this place. Balance? Naruto attempted to respond. What do you think? Before being ejected from his mindscape, he shook his head and saw his senseis, Yamato and Kakashi, standing before him in their full Junin regalia, which included black Anbu suits and green vests. The sluggish silver-haired Junin Kakashi said, "Nice to see you join the land of the living, Naruto. What just happened?" Naruto scratched the back of his head and looked around. "Not much," he said. "Are we clear?" Yamato questioned cautiously. "Why are you asking that, Naruto?" Naruto calmly looked both Junin in the eye and said, "I had a conversation with it." The concern on both ninjas' faces was obvious as they turned to face their pupil. No matter how hard they tried to hide it, it was clear after quickly surveying the area. The two men used a silencing jutsu. They sat down beside Naruto and gestured for him to go on after a tiny shimmer pulsated through the stand. Naruto said grimly, "For once, I was glad that the fox talked to me, and worried as well." Kakashi noticed the expression on his face. He has never witnessed Naruto behave in this way. His mood was usually upbeat, and he never displayed the expression he had now. Kakashi would have assumed Naruto was irrationally afraid if he hadn't known any better. Concerned by Naruto's expression, Yamato asked, "What did the Kyuubi mention?" Even though he had only worked with him on a single mission, he could already tell that this was not the self-assured and cheerful ninja he usually was. With a sigh, Naruto made sure both ninjas understood how serious the situation was by staring into their eyes. Kyuubi sensed a powerful evil from that display in the sky in his words. He was concerned and wanted to talk again. If the evil he sensed would upset the balance. "I do not know about you two, but anything that is evil enough to concern the Kyuubi can't be a good thing." Before choosing a strategy, Kakashi and Yamato paused to consider it. Kakashi questioned, "Did he mention anything else?" Naruto said plainly, staring absently at the door, "Not as of yet. I do not think he really knows what it was that came from the sky, but the aura that it gave off chilled my soul at the funeral." Kakashi gave nod. "All right, Naruto, head back to your place and pack up. Just in case we need to set out. Yamato Taicho and I will speak with the Hokage after we are done. I will meet you at your place. We will continue our training unless we are told otherwise." Naruto said, "Hi." As he left for his location, he somehow sensed that there was no time to waste and that a mission was imminent. The magnificent Naruto Bridge, gazing upon a huge bridge that overlooked a strait between the mainland and an offshore island. Alexia bounded out of the portal. She brandished her claws, surveyed her surroundings, and noticed her team standing directly in front of the bridge, examining a bronze plaque that was mounted on the bridge's right stanchion. Calming down and covering her claws, she walked over to her team. She took a moment to examine the plaque they were reading. The magnificent Naruto Bridge committed to the deeds of a certain Uzumaki Naruto and his group. They demonstrated to a nation and a village that there were still heroes in the world. As Barrack and Mia looked out over the horizon, taking in the new surroundings, she took in the words on the plaque and looked at Celine leaning on Anstrom for support. "Well, from the looks of things, we know there are decent people around here. If this plaque is true, it also means there is a village nearby. Do you sense anything, Barrack?" Alexia asked her closest friend. "From the smell on the air, there is a fishing village just on the other side of this bridge. I do not sense any evil intent here. I also sense a familiar scent. I know he didn't come with us, so it can't be who I think it is. Either way, I say we scout ahead." Barrack responded. He looked to the horizon, waving his hand and making a cawing sound with his lips. A few seconds later, he saw two ravens flying toward them. The two ravens responded to his caw by blinking, cawing, and taking off for the bridge on the opposite side. When the ravens returned a few minutes later, they brought a report to their human counterpart, who nodded and dismissed the two bird scouts. It appears that there is a small conversation going on at the other side of the bridge. The two scouts could not fully pick out who they were, but one seemed to have a gray cloak on and carried an old walking stick. "If my impressions are correct, I believe a friend of ours is up ahead." Alexia asked the group, "Anyone object to us going into the village?" Mia slung her bow on her back and began to pace the room, saying, "Let's go already. I hate wasting time here." Sheathing his broad sword and carrying his enormous shield, Anstrom said, "There should be no problems with going on ahead. Coming to this place in front of a bridge dedicated to someone of honor and heroism truly must be a sign." As she fastened her casting rod to her belt, Celine grinned and said, "I do not think there could be any problems with this. Perhaps chance has smiled upon us this time." Alexia led the way, with the others trailing behind in a basic defensive formation. "Okay then, let's move out." Glancing around, I could see that the sun was shining and the air was crisp. Everyone could smell the sea, and there was a cool breeze in the air. They began to notice how the group in front of them appeared as they marched forward as mentioned. There was an elderly man leaning on a staff, wearing a gray cloak. A man in tan pants and a gray flannel vest was standing next to him. He had a conical straw hat on his head. He wore glasses, had a beard, and was tanned from spending so much time in the sun. Beside the man were a woman and a teenager, who were attentively listening to their conversation. The elderly man turned toward the party's direction after cocking his head as though sensing something. When they were within 50 meters, a smile appeared on his wise face as he caught a glimpse of the group approaching him, and he gestured them to come closer. When Alexia noticed this, she sped up a little so that the group could get closer to the man, who appeared to be friendly. They recognized the man in front of them as soon as they were within a few meters of him. In his typical elderly wise voice, Deckard Cain answered, "Greetings, young Alexia. I am glad to have met you again, and I see your group is not worse for wear." Alexia greeted the man they had rescued many moons ago with warmth, saying, "Greetings to you as well, Master Cain. It is a surprise to see you here. How did you get here?" His counsel was eventually viewed favorably by the group and was always essential to their success. "I imagine it was the same as you when the quakes started and the energies of our realm fell apart. Tyrell sent me here. He stated that you may need my counsel once again. I arrived in the middle of this village." Initially the response was not the warmest of things, but Tazuna here and his family took me in. He responded by pointing to the man with the straw and the other two individuals. "I was about to head out heading for a village called Konoha that these people told me of. They told me about a boy named Uzumaki Naruto and they stated he would be one to trust. Supposedly, he freed these people from a tyrant and helped protect this man while he finished the bridge you just crossed." Barrick answered, "Yes, we read the plaque on the other side of the bridge. Sage, are you sure Konoha is where we should head?" In their trademark manner, Cain shot back, "I am quite sure, Druid." Neither of the two ever addressed the other by name. Instead, they used their titles. This was considered disrespectful by most, but it was actually quite the opposite for the Druid and the Horadric Sage. "If I may intercede here, since there are more of you and you have been reunited, it might be best to spend the night here. A messenger bird was sent along over an hour ago telling of your arrival and intent to go to Konoha. Someone from Konoha would come to escort you to the gates. I was trying to explain this to your friend here, but he wanted to go anyways in hopes of finding you along the way by the looks of things. Except for the young lady in black and red, none of you are ninja and would most likely be deemed suspicious if you approached the gates as a group." Tazuna responded, "I am sure my daughter would not mind boarding you up for a couple of days, while we wait for your escorts." "Hama, your words do have merit and your hospitality is appreciated, especially since you helped our friend here," replied Anstrom. "I have no problem waiting here. What do you think, my lady?" Celine grinned as she saw the paladin's face. "I think that would work just fine." Alexia answered, "Well then, we will stay. Thank you for your offer, Tazuna. If you would not mind leading the way." Tazuna then nodded and beckoned them all to follow him as he guided them to his home. Behind the group, the young woman and the teenage boy strolled and conversed. Looking up at his mother, the teenage boy said, "This is a very interesting group. Kasan, I liked Cain-sama. He seemed nice." With a soft smile, the mother replied, "Cain-sama did seem rather pleasant. Inari-kun, it will be nice having visitors again." Looking at his mother with hope, Inari asked, "Do you think Naruto-Nisan, Kakashi-san, Sakura-chan, and Sasuke-san will be the ones coming from Konoha, Kasan?" "I would not be surprised. You remember Naruto-kun promised he would come back. Do you think he would break his word?" the mother replied softly. On behalf of his daughter and grandson, Tazuna responded, "I wouldn't be surprised Naruto-san would be sprinting over here as soon as word reached Konoha, Tsunami-chan." For the first time in a long time, Inari grinned warmly. He was aware that he would soon see his hero and Nisan again. Office of the Hokage omens are diverse in size and shape. Some people think it's caused by a black cat or a cracked picture that happens to cross your path. Some people think it originates from a rainbow or a change in the wind. It came with a simple lottery ticket for the sultry woman who occupied the chair that many great men had occupied before her. The moniker, Legendary Sucker, was not chosen by Lady Tsunade for no reason. She had a reputation for consistently placing poor wagers, so much so that it was widely known that the opposite would happen if she placed a wager. Unless, of course, the wager was successful. Trouble was inevitable whenever she won a wager or other gambling proposition. She recently won the Fire Country lottery, and it happened right before Asuma passed away. She now owned millions of ryo, but that only meant that there would be a great deal of trouble ahead. Glancing out the window, the blonde took in the view of her village. 3 years after Orochimaru's attempt at destruction, reconstruction was progressing satisfactorily. Regretfully, There were not as many shinobi prepared for battle as was necessary. She guessed that Konoha was only half as strong as it had been during the last major shinobi war. She didn't think it would be sufficient to repel a full-scale assault by Orochimaru's Sound Army or an attack by every member of the Akatsuki. She hoped that was not the meaning of this omen. A knock on her door interrupted her as she turned back to her desk, still wearing her black funeral clothes, and reached into a hidden compartment to retrieve a bottle of sake. As she straightened in her chair, she complained to herself, "There are times when I wish I had just stayed in Tanzuka town." Enter two of her most trusted Junin, Kakashi and Yamato, entered through the open door, escorted by a young brunette wearing a navy blue kimono. Shizune, her assistant, did not appear happy. She was aware, just like the Hokage, that it was always a bad sign when Yamato or Kakashi entered her office. She wondered how all the omens were lining up against her, especially when she saw the two men's worried expressions. Shizune said courteously, "Tsunade-sama, Yamato-san, and Kakashi-san have some interesting news." Tsunade responded, clasping her hands in front of her chin in a reflective position. "Please tell me you have some decent news between the Akatsuki attack and the last encounter with Sasuke and Orochimaru. I could use a bit of good news." "I wish that was the case. Did you see the streaks that appeared across the sky during the funeral?" Kakashi replied calmly. Tsunade observed two things that were unusual for the lethargic Junin. He was standing attentively rather than leaning against a wall, and he was not reading his book. She had more warning signs. "I do not think anyone failed to notice them. There was an ominous feeling to them. What of it?" "For some reason, those objects that fell from the sky caused a reaction from our lovable blonde and Hisa tenant," Yamato shot back. Concerned about the young ninja she frequently regarded as her brother or even as a son, she asked quickly, "It didn't mess with the seal, did it?" Tsunade raised her eyebrows in response to Kakashi's statement. "No, but it forced the two of them to have a conversation. According to Naruto, it seems that the Kyuubi is concerned about those streaks and the evil they represent. It was worried that the new evil would upset the balance. That demon is actually concerned about something other than destruction. Did it affect Naruto's mood or cause any changes in him?" Tsunade inquired. "Other than a general concern over the Kyuubi's words, there was nothing else that I could see," replied Yamato. Shizune saw a bird land on the windowsill behind the Godem as the three of them were talking about what had happened during Naruto's audience with the great demon fox. She quickly examined jutsu and discovered no traps. She went to the window and threw it open. The seagull had a tiny red pouch fastened to its leg. She gave the note from Tazuna to the Godem to read after finding it in the pouch. "Godem-sama, let me start by expressing Wave Country's sympathy for your recent loss. Sarutobi Asuma was a well-known figure, and we will miss his brightness regretfully. I must share some news. This morning, a visitor arrived. You must have seen the things that dropped from the sky." Deckard Cain, the visitor, arrived just before those objects fell. He recognized those items and wanted to visit Konoha right away, specifically to ask our hero, Uzumaki Naruto, for assistance. Despite his heavy reliance on his walking stick, the elderly man is in good physical condition. Additionally, he appears to have an unearthly understanding of things that could be useful. He insists on traveling alone to Konoha, ostensibly in order to locate his traveling companions. I'll do my best to keep him here. I formally ask 1 or 2 teams to visit my home and meet with Deckard Cain. Please let Naruto-san's team arrive if you can. Master Bridge Builder Tazuna. She glanced up from the note and scribbled a quick response. Shizune was given it by Tsunade to put back in the pouch. Tsunade spoke after sending the bird on its way. "Shizune, what teams are present in Konoha now?" "Team Kakashi, Team Kurenai, and the remainder of Team 10. The 20 Guardians are still out and Team Guy should be back within the day. All of the Genin teams are here and most of the Anbu, except for 100 Nin squad, are present as well," she responded quickly. Tsunade asked firmly, "Kakashi, are you ready to go back out?" "I am ready. Hokage-sama, good, gather your team. Yamato, inform the remainder of Team 10 that they will accompany you as well. Your mission is to go to Wave and meet with Tazuna. He has an elderly man with him named Deckard Cain. Supposedly, he has information about those objects." This Deckard Cain also mentioned wanting to meet Uzumaki Naruto and is also in search of some companions. Tazuna may not be able to keep this man there, so keep an eye out for him on the way. Make sure you keep an eye out for any further Akatsuki activity. Yamato gave a nod. "Understood. Hokage-sama. Shizune, send messenger birds to call the 20 Guardians back and please inform one of the Anbu to retrieve Jiraiya once everyone is back and we get whatever information this Deckard Cain has. We will go from there. Until then, no more missions are to be handed out between the Akatsuki, these objects, and Orochimaru's machinations. I have the feeling Konoha needs to be at full strength quickly." "Hi, Tsunade-sama." Tsunade curtly replied. Dismissed, the three swiftly left the office with a sigh. Tsunade returned her attention to the village she cherished despite the impending severe headache. she refrained from reaching for her bottle of sake. She felt that she needed some time to sober up. Root HQ Root, the secret Anbu group's nerve center, was located half a mile beneath Hokage Tower. This group had a single mission under the leadership of Danzo, a seasoned elder with numerous battle scars and bandages along his right side. By any means necessary, Root worked to protect the great tree known as Konoha. He consistently disapproved of Sandame's nonviolent approaches, favoring a strict militaristic approach to daily matters. He could respect her fierce temper and her desire to defend Konoha because the Godem was in charge, but he didn't think she was a strong mother. He began to set himself up to be that leader because he sensed that the time was coming when a stronger leader would be required. He thought about those things that dropped from the sky. In light of that, he viewed them as merely tools to be used, as the Kyuubi Jinchuriki ought to have been. Even though most people perceived their malevolent nature, Uzumaki Naruto would have been the ideal weapon for Root to use for the glory of Konoha. If the Sandame hadn't had sufficient support to keep him under his guard, he was determined not to let another chance slip through his fingers. Despite balancing on his metal cane in his right hand, he stood erect. 3 of his reliable Root Anbu soldiers, all wearing simple, unremarkable masks and armor, were kneeling in front of him. Agents 3 through 5, your mission is to find those falling objects and retrieve them. Do not return if you do not obtain one of them. Danzo gave the order after nodding. The 3 agents vanished from view. Konoha is 20 leagues away. The loss of the body required to claim the bounty on Sarutobi Asuma greatly upset Kakuzu. He was a notable bounty hunter, one of the 2 immortals used by the Akatsuki for more than a century. He has endured interactions with Konoha Nin and Hunter Nin from other countries. All of his previous partners had perished due to negligence or the passage of time, which he was able to evade. His partner had recovered completely from the extraction procedure in the earlier fight with the Konoha ninjas last week, and it was now early in the afternoon. Although he was aware that there were other teams out there, he believed that now that they were fully operational, they could safely move closer to their goal. Even though their leader could only be seen through holographic projection, his strength was evident. One of the last Jinchuriki, a female Kumo Nin named Ni Yugito, had already been acquired by them. She was able to transform into a full-fledged demon while holding the Nekomata Nibi inside of her, but their powers were too strong for the demon container. This was the most difficult goal they had yet to achieve. The Kyuubi no Kitsune, the strongest of the fabled-tailed demons that roamed the earth, had a Jinchuriki named Uzumaki Naruto. Because Kakuzu and his partner, Hidan, were already in the area, Leader Sama had to reassign the capture of Naruto to them after he escaped the team of Uchiha Itachi and Hoshigaki Kisame. Hidan himself managed to withstand deadly assaults, such as beheadings and various types of dismemberment and impalement, as long as his rites were performed. His cultist techniques were insane in their efficiency and brutality, but they had to back off during his most recent battle because they were losing the numbers game. They were prepared to leave now. I am getting antsy. The silver-haired cultist smiled maniacally. We had to sit still for 6 days now, sealing the Nibi. Let us find this Uzumaki Naruto. Jashin is demanding another sacrifice. Hopefully he will be a worthy sacrifice to my god. Kakuzu responded scornfully. Just shut up and get moving. I want to get this over with. The 2 were walking toward Konoha when they noticed a reddish glow coming from the west. Even though it was far off in the horizon, the aura that came from that region seemed strong enough to make the 2 immortals gasp. Kakuzu pauses to gather his thoughts, then turns and approaches it. Startled that he wasn't following, Hidan turned to face his partner. Kakuzu, what are you doing? Konoha is this way. Are you stupid? Did you not feel the power from that aura? I know our goal is the Jinchuriki, but Leader Sama would want this investigated. It also allows us to take a different path to Konoha and confuse the enemy. As his partner left, Hidan simply stared incredulously. He let out a submissive sigh and turned to follow. A shadow appeared to follow the 2 as they walked slowly. They marched for an hour before coming to a burned-out clearing. A clear line of burned trees and other vegetation led to a small crater in the middle of the clearing. Kakuzu cautiously made his way toward the crater, still observing the euphoric red aura emanating from whatever was inside. He saw the red horn-shaped crystal emitting the powerful aura. As he crossed the zenith and went down into the crater, he saw fit to cut a piece of his cloak, wrap it around the crystal, and then seal it inside a scroll out of caution. Suddenly he heard a gurgling scream coming from behind him. Kakuzu turned to see his partner using his triple-bladed scythe to impale a ninja wearing armor through the masked ninja's chest. This was not even a good sacrifice. Jashin is displeased with this ninja's skill, Hidan declared when he leaned over and took off the mask. He saw a young man with a red head and dilated pale brown eyes. There are no discernible markings on this man, except for this plain Anbu mask. Kakuzu said indifferently, that is a mark of Konoha's root force, led by a man named Danzo, a veteran of both the war between Konoha and Iwa as well as the Kyuubi attack. However, he is not as hidden as he believes he is. It is unfortunate that he did not train better. Ninja Jashin is getting impatient, Hidan replied. As he turned north and made his way to one of the Akatsuki's safe houses, Kakuzu said, "That is not our concern now. We should find a new hiding place and contact leader Sama. He will want to know what we found." Hidan moaned as he trailed behind. This better be worth it. Somehow, when his partner described what he had discovered, a shiver ran up his spine. Surely the immortals can't suffer any harm. Main gate of Konoha. Shikamaru had just completed checking his equipment. He took his time, but with more resolve than usual for the lazy genius that he was deeply affected by his sensei's passing, and he trained this past week more stylishly than ever. He could say the same about his teammates in an attempt to exact revenge on their 3-year sensei. Sarutobi Asuma, Yamanaka Ino and Akamichi Choji stepped up their training. Choji was usually more focused on eating, but Ino was usually more focused on her appearance. Like the blonde bombshell that she was, they were now prepared, unlike this week. Shikamaru was called out by his teammates as he pocketed his sensei's old lighter, buckled his sandals, and sheathed his new trench knives. "Hey Shikamaru," began Choji. "Are you ready?" concluded Ino. "Hi," Shikamaru said. "Let's move out," a strong male voice yelled from behind the three of them as they turned and got closer to the gate's threshold. "Stop." The three of them turned. A little startled Yamato, Team Kakashi's temporary sensei, stood in front of them. "Why are you stopping us, Yamato-san? We still have our standing orders to pursue the Akatsuki members in Fire Country." Ino was slightly perturbed. "New orders from the Hokage pack for an escort mission. You were to accompany Team Kakashi and myself to Wave Country." Yamato gave his approval. With a sigh, Shikamaru grabbed a cigarette, holding it between pursed lips. He lit it. The objects that fell from the sky changed their orders, didn't they? As he vanished in a whirl of leaves, Yamato responded, sharp as ever, "Nara-san, meet back here in 1 hour." Dismissed. Choji and Ino looked at their unspoken leader and teammate with a disappointed expression. Shikamaru was the first to create Chunin and was always the most intelligent of the three. He consistently produced a plan whenever they faced a challenging situation or had to make a crucial choice. As he extinguished his cigarette, Shikamaru said bluntly, "You heard him. Get packing for an escort mission." With disbelief, Ino gazed at her teammate. "What about those Akatsuki bastards? We can't let them get away. There will be more opportunities. It is doubtful that they will not come again for the person they want here in Konoha, as troublesome as waiting is going to be. Their true objective is here, and we will be here waiting for them to reappear. We got our orders and we should follow them," replied Shikamaru. With those words, the three of them trudged away. Shikamaru had already pieced together their intentions on the inside. They appeared to be seeking unique people all the time, from the attack by Uchiha Itachi and his partner Hoshigaki Hisame to the attack in Suna by the two Akatsuki members on the Kagekazi. It is clear from the evidence he saw that they were pursuing Naruto Uzumaki. Naruto was unique, as evidenced by his actions recorded in mission reports and by eyewitnesses at 3 different events. They have more chances to defeat their targets when they are close to Team Kakashi. Shikamaru looked up at the clouds in the sky and thought, "Sensei, we'll get that guy for you and stay close to Naruto until we do." Kakashi took his way to his first teammate's house. The apartment where Haruno Sakura and her mother Peachy resided was in one of Konoha's middle-class neighborhoods. Her mother told her stories about her father, who passed away during the Kyuubi attack years ago. She was merely a fangirl with no real ninja skills other than her intelligence when the team first started. This changed years ago when Uchiha Sasuke, the man she was crushing on, was corrupted by a seal that the Snake Sanin, Orochimaru, gave him. Sakura has been adamant about improving her skills ever since he betrayed the Leaf, and Naruto was hurt during the unsuccessful attempt to get him back. She trained under Godem, Tsunade, and the Slug Sanin in the nearly 3 years that have passed. Her chakra stores, strength, and endurance all increased as a result of that training, which also refined her healing skills. She had achieved the rank of Chunin and was now nearly as powerful as the Sanin herself. Regretfully, this caused Kakashi some concern. The traitorous Uchiha appeared to be the only person he actually trained. Yes, he did occasionally train Naruto, but not very often. Kakashi used to be oblivious to the needs of his fellow genin teammates because of Sasuke and the way he appeared to be his long-dead teammate. Kakashi hardly ever had time to train either of his remaining teammates because of the recent events. They were both Sanin's apprentices. Kakashi hesitated before knocking on Sakura's door because of that fact. For Sakura and Naruto, did he go far enough? It might be his time to die since Asuma, one of the Rookie Nine's 3 senseis, passed away. If so, did he leave enough of himself in those two, as Asuma did in Kurenai's unborn child and Shikamaru? Although he didn't believe so, he decided to make up for lost time if he had the opportunity during or after this mission. Sakura had just finished preparing for another day of honing her medical skills at the Konoha hospital. Inside the apartment, Sakura vowed to become stronger for the benefit of both Naruto and herself. After witnessing the wounds he sustained at the hands of Sasuke, she had become a medical ninja. After years of training under Tsunade, she even enhanced her taijutsu by absorbing her master's immense strength. As she looked at the team photo she knew it was still insufficient. Sasuke was still too strong and stubborn to want to return home from her most recent mission, and Naruto continued to injure himself. I'm going to get strong enough somehow. I can bring Sasuke-kun home when I do, and Naruto won't get hurt in the process, Sakura thought. A knock on her door cut through her thoughts. She left her bedroom and went to the front door, saying, "Who could that be? No one usually comes by here but Ino." She was shocked to discover Kakashi-sensei prepared to embark on a mission when she opened it. "Oi! Sakura, Tsunade-sama has given us a mission. We have an escort mission back to Wave along Yamato Taicho and Team 8 meet us at the gates at the top of the hour." Kakashi was deadpanned. "Great, I didn't really feel like going to the hospital today anyways. Will we have time to see Tazuna, Inari, and Tsunami?" Sakura was hopeful. After responding, Kakashi bounded off toward Naruto's apartment. "That is our destination." Tazuna was the one requesting the escort for a visitor of his. "Now get packing, I will see you at the gates." If an Anbu captain, 2 Junin, 3 Chunin, and Naruto are required to escort someone, it must be a significant person. As Sakura started packing, she thought, that or Tsunade-sama is afraid of another Akatsuki attack on Naruto, and Naruto was asked for this mission. Hopefully, this mission will go more smoothly than the last time to Wave. The rest of their mission team was waiting for Naruto and Kakashi as they made their way to the main gate. As with their previous encounters, Yamato was attempting to defuse a fight between Ino and Sakura. Choji was sitting next to them, eating some deer jerky that Shikamaru had given him, while Shikamaru was leaning against the wall and gazing up at the clouds. Sai sat aside and sketched the altercation between Sakura and Ino. "Kakashi-sensei, do we really need backup on this mission? Wasn't this supposed to be a simple escort job?" Naruto was puzzled. "You know as well as I do that there are too many variables going on right now with that Akatsuki pair running around nearby and those unknown objects. We can't be too careful as we speak. Everyone else is being pulled back to the village, including Jiraiya-sama and 20 squads out hunting." Kakashi gave Naruto a briefing. Concerned about his longtime friend Shikamaru, Naruto asked quietly as they drew closer, "What about Team 10? Should they be going out right now?" As they reached the gate, Kakashi said quietly, "It would be better if they traveled with us instead of going off alone. Remember Sasuke?" Naruto was aware of what he meant. Sasuke betrayed the team and the village in order to acquire power for his personal desire for vengeance. Though he secretly knew Shikamaru was too intelligent to attempt that, he didn't want to see his friend fall into that trap in any case. He felt compelled to speak with him. Naruto approached the Nara and said, "Ui, Shikamaru, are you doing alright? Feel up for this?" Without turning away from a single cloud floating overhead, Shikamaru answered, "Hi, I'll be fine Naruto, I appreciate the concern. I wish I had more time with Asuma. He seemed like a very wise sensei. I appreciated the help he gave me with using futon-based jutsus." Naruto replied with regret. He wanted to work with him more because he was a fellow futon user, but he never really had the opportunity. Recalling that day, Shikamaru responded, "I think he knew. He could tell by how enthusiastic you were." It happened in the midst of their most recent shogi match. Upon Naruto's departure after the demonstration, Asuma observed his enthusiasm and genuinely desired to provide him with additional guidance. "Maybe I can see if he had some futon scrolls left with Kurenai-sensei or Konohamaru." With a smile, Naruto said, "I'd like that a lot." Shikamaru merely nodded in response, saying, "If you need anything, just let me know, even if it may be too troublesome to ask." Fire Country's outskirts. At night, a few leagues away, Kakuzu and Hidan discovered a cave where they sat in a meditative state. They extended their mental reach and sent their astral selves to an unidentified place. The projections of the 7 other members of their team stood there on the fingertips of a large stone statue. The number of Akatsuki members had once been 10. The 10th member, Orochimaru, left the group to pursue his personal objectives soon after the Ichibi Shukaku was sealed. Sasori of the Red Sands, one of their members, passed away. Fortunately, following the successful capture of the three-tailed turtle, Tobi became a full member of their group. There was a projection of a man with ringed eyes and spiky hair on the thumb of the left hand. Meetings were usually called by him, but Kakuzu had important news to share. The man's voice echoed darkly as he asked, "What was so urgent to call this meeting?" "We have discovered an interesting object on our way to Konoha to capture the Jinchuriki of Kyuubi no Kitsune." A red horn-shaped crystal was found from a league away. The power of the aura it held was immense. "I have sealed in a scroll while obtaining this crystal. We were attacked by one of Danzo's root. Leader Sama Hidan dispatched him easily. The leader asked expectantly, "You think this crystal is important enough to postpone your mission?" In a straightforward response, Kakuzu said, "I would believe so between the power of the aura and who was after it." He ended the meeting by saying, "Very well, bring it to me." Hidan gave his partner a questioning glance. "Why are we abandoning the mission? Don't you want that bounty on the Jinchuriki's head?" Kakuzu said, "We can get him later. I want to get this object to Leader Sama. I don't like how it feels." Hidan nodded, scowled, and got to his feet. Both of them had faith in the leader's skills. But anything that worried Kakuzu could not be good. He could use the crystal. Surely they would have buried that scroll if they had known what was going to happen in the coming days. Two men in plain black armor strode toward their next target a few leagues away from where the two Akatsuki members were meeting. The two root agents had a mission to finish, so they had no time to grieve for their recently deceased comrade. They didn't want to let Danzo down again, and the second object's impact site was just over the next ridge. The two became more hateful as they passed from shadow to moonlight shadow to become the ideal shinobi. They were taught to suppress their emotions from a young age, but the object they were tracking now appeared to reactivate those feelings with each step they took toward the target. One of them, a tall, wiry, hairless man, appeared to be trying hard to maintain his composure behind his mask. More subdued was his partner, a tall, athletic woman with black hair pulled back in a ponytail. One of Danzo's scouts approached her and she joined Root a month before the Kyuubi attack. He wanted her skills in the organization, and she was known as Shrapnel Maiden because of her ability to charge metallic objects with explosive chakra. Given that the Yondaime was not going to last forever and that any means of gaining strength would be beneficial to a village that greatly relied on his abilities and intimidating presence, she readily agreed. She refined her abilities and became ruthless and cunning while she was under Danzo's supervision. She never failed a mission for Root, which helped her rise to the top of the organization. Every number that an agent was given corresponded to their position within the company. After her successful mission of planting evidence of a diversionary nature for Shizune, the Hokage's assistant, to discover, she was recently promoted to Agent 3 as her partner's feelings of disgust and hatred grew. She began making plans in case he lost his mind. She knew that agents never fell in rank, so she could not possibly fail this mission that was so important to Danzo-sama. They simply vanished. When the two arrived at the peak of the ridge, they noticed an intriguing sight. Although there was an impact crater, there was no charring compared to the list site. Rather, the air was charged. As though it were electrified, the crater had a blue aura, and it appeared that hatred emanated from it. She turned to face her partner and saw that he had taken off his mask. His face was marked with a sense of disdain and hatred. As she descended to the crater, she thought to herself, if this can affect the thoughts of even a trained agent, it must be an object of extraordinary power. But I can't get rid of the overwhelming sense of evil that it gives me before someone shady gets their hands on this. It's best to lock it up. As she entered the crater, she produced a sealing scroll. She saw the blue crystal inside, glimmering brightly, its spiteful energy filling the room. It appeared as though death itself would not claim it, and it was shaped like a bony finger. She reached for the object with a gloved hand, steeling her mind against the disdain it was attempting to evoke in her soul. Thwack! 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 3-foot-long skewers dripping with a greenish fluid prevented her from grasping the object. She spun around and saw the angry face of Agent 4, her current adversary and former teammate, with fresh skewers beginning to protrude from beneath his bowed wrists. He was extending his hands. "Hands off that, you wench," said the man sarcastically. "You will not be stealing another rank that I should have had." 3 questioned, "What are you talking about? We are under orders to get this to Danzo-sama. Clear your head. This object is affecting you." "Enough, wench. I will kill you and become Agent 3, and when I take the object for myself, I will leave Root, not Danzo. He never recognized me over you. Now you will both pay." She was able to easily avoid a pair of skewers that were launched from his wrists just as another volley of skewers landed where she had been standing. She snatched up the crystal and jumped out of the crater, avoiding 4 skewers, which were constantly coming at them. Required all of her strength. She was able to seal the crystal in the scroll. After overcoming the ridge, she could hear 4 screaming violently behind her as he ran up the ridge after her. 3 teleported back to the crater using Shunshin. She gave 4 a mental command to relax her chakra restraints after noticing that she was taking a long time to turn around at that moment. 4 turned to see the afterimage of 3 standing in the crater after sensing her behind him. Before his armor exploded, all he could feel and hear was a whisper in the wind and a tap to his chest plate. Nensou Kinzoku Shinsei, Burning Metal Nova. Agent 3 put the scroll in her pouch a few hundred meters away and exhaled deeply. Not realizing she had been holding it in, she took a few seconds to locate a tree, then jumped up to perch on its strongest branch. 4 isn't usually like that. He moves and attacks more subtly and in a quieter manner. He had a more sly and crafty approach usually. He would wait and hide in the shadows before striking his target with his skewers, allowing his naturally occurring poison to swiftly kill them. Rather, he launched a vicious and unprovoked attack. Having digested her thoughts, she got up and began jumping from one branch to another. She still had an assignment to finish, but she wasn't sure if it was truly worthwhile. She would, at the very least, depend on Danzo-sama's abilities and intelligence to manage the crystal. Things have been going well for Wave Country, a small island. Ever since the bridge was dedicated, the economy flourished as trade goods and tourists from nearby nations poured in. Children were no longer begging and stealing food in the village by the bridge, and there were no longer hungry people living on the streets. Even though fishing remained their primary source of income, the growth of trade and tourism gave people the opportunity to pursue new careers and positions of prestige. Among them was Tazuna, the well-known bridge builder. His building abilities were in high demand in the nearby village. It was necessary to construct new stores, schools, and other structures. Tsunami transformed their small home into a spacious bed and breakfast cottage using his talents as a hostess and the funds from the construction company. Its 15 spacious rooms were rather charming and cozy, and it became a well-known haven for tired tourists, including ninjas who were on missions nearby. For the time being, the sanctuary group of heroes occupied those rooms. Alexia was the last to wake up the following morning. Although the accommodations were more comfortable than the bedrolls they used around the campfire in Harrogate, she was still getting used to them. Every room featured a dresser, a basic bathroom, a small table with a lamp, and a respectable full bed. It would do. Even though it might not have been the sweets that the ruler of Loot Golain had given them, her muscle aches were greatly reduced by the simple act of being able to take a good bath. She took a warm bath before deciding to take off her armor. Instead, she wore her black leather-heeled boots, a simple silver-studded belt, a loose black blouse with a single red stripe down the side, and black and red pants. She went to the dining room, which was downstairs. There were 2 long, carved wooden tables in the rather spacious room. Pictures of marine life were displayed on the ocean blue walls. There was a big red and tan rug on the polished wood floor. The rest of her team, Kane, Tazuna, and his family were seated at one table, while buffet trays containing scrambled eggs, sausage, bacon, ham, hash browns, fruit, and bread were placed on the other. Fantastic. Despite being a basic bed, I was able to sleep past everyone else because it was comfortable. I'm usually the first to wake up. I must have needed the rest, she thought as she picked up a plate and piled hash browns, fruit, and eggs on it. Their leader sat down beside her, and Mia said, "Morning, Alexia. I trust you had a decent rest?" Alexia looked around and saw that none of her team members were wearing their armor. The blonde Amazon wore tan leather pants with a few small slits on the outside of her thighs and a red halter top that accentuated her ample assets. Her hair was pulled back in a ponytail. She wore tan leather boots with laces as well. The dark-skinned paladin wore plain gray shoes, brown slacks, a brown belt, and a green tunic. Celine was dressed modestly at the neck in a royal purple dress that ended just above the knee. She accessorized everything with amethyst stiletto heels and wore 2 amethyst rings on her left hand. The only people who continued to dress more or less normally were Barrick and Kane. The older sage was wearing his brown sandals, traveling pants, tunic, and gray cloak. Brown leather pants, fur-lined hiking boots, and a fur-lined leather shirt that highlighted his massive frame were all worn by the burly druid. Before taking a bite out of her eggs, Alexia said, "I guess this is the first time in a long while that we managed to sit down and have a meal without worry about heading out to battle. Thanks for cooking this great meal, Tsunami." She smiled and said, "Anything for our valued guests. Feel free to eat your fill. A cook is always pleased when their food is well received." Alexia inquired, "Has any word been sent from Konoha?" Kane sipped from his cup of hot tea and said, "It appears that they sent a team out to meet us. They should be here in 2 more days." "You mentioned your group usually headed out to battle after a meal. Was the fighting that often?" replied Tazuna. Anstrom told their hosts, "It was a long and arduous struggle over 2 continents, which even stretched into the bowels of hell itself." After that, Inari and Tazuna asked their guests a plethora of questions about the towns they visited, the treasures and other wonders they discovered, and the demons and undead creatures they battled. The story took 2 hours to complete. The young boy had visions of his own glory throughout the story, defending those he loved from bandits and beasts. He first had this dream after witnessing his self-proclaimed brother Naruto save Wave Country by assisting in the defeat of the bandits that the Tycoon Gato had hired, as well as saving his mother from 2 ruthless thugs. He was eager to begin his training. After hearing this tale, he couldn't begin his dream without assistance, though, as his mother still wanted him to help out around the house and run the bed and breakfast. Several leagues away, the joint escort squad members had differing opinions. The other members of Team 10 were bored with their basic escort mission and frustrated that they were unable to find the criminals who killed their sensei. Sakura and Naruto were overjoyed to see their friends from the first mission they had made outside Konoha's gates all those years ago. The group's remaining members were silent and thoughtful. That was nothing new to Sai, the artistic ninja. Normally, Kakashi and Yamato were also silent, but this time they were considering Naruto's repetition of the information that the Kyuubi had given him. The odds had always been stacked against the two veterans. Since Orochimaru made Sarutobi-sama give his life to stop his renegade student, the Akatsuki and the Sound have been putting constant pressure on him, making it impossible to avoid. Whatever these objects were, their arrival added to the uncertainty. When you added that to Asuma's passing, the pressure was greater than it had ever been. The former members of Anbu were both aware of the importance of information in such a situation, and they felt that it was worth it if Deckard Cain could provide it to the Hokage. It was already midday, and the group had been moving since the morning light. When the silver-haired Junin surveyed the team, she noticed that they were all a little disheveled and in need of a quick snack or rest. Kakashi yelled, "Let's pause for a second, take 30 and get water and a snack." Naruto, who was eager to see what would happen to his first clients, particularly Inari, complained, "Why, Kakashi-sensei? There is still over a day and a half distance between us and Wave. We could pick up the pace a bit." During his journey with Ero Sennin, whom he affectionately referred to as Jiraiya, he paid him a visit once. Naruto left instructions for the tree climbing and water walking exercises because his younger brother, who was pure spirit, had expressed a wish to become a ninja like him. Perhaps he could train him a little, knowing he would see him again. "You may have world-class stamina, Naruto Baka, but some of us need a break," Ino reprimanded her temporary teammate after the 6-hour march. Her feet were worn out and in need of a rest. "Ino is right, no army marches on an empty stomach. We aren't in any danger right now and it would be too troublesome to bother rushing this. Relax, will you?" replied Shikamaru. As he put down his pack and searched for a cup of instant ramen, Naruto complained to himself. When Yamato noticed this, he threw Naruto one of his extra ration bars. He gave it a questioning look before turning to look at its previous owner. "Why did you toss me this? I packed enough ramen for me to eat." Sakura approached Naruto and gave him a shoulder slug. "You do know we are not staying long enough to make a fire, right?" Leaving the ramen in his pack, Naruto took the bar and scratched the back of his head sheepishly. "Gomen. Sakura-chan, I guess that is why you are Boshin's apprentice. Arigato, Yamato-sensei." Sakura simply shook her head and proceeded to a small log to fish for a strawberry pouch she owned. Ino paused and sat down beside her. Ino told her longtime friend, "I suppose Naruto is still the same Baka we knew before." The medic Nin answered, "He does have his moments, but there are times where he will still surprise you." She glanced at her blonde companion, who was observing Naruto sniffing and hesitantly nibbling at the ration bar. "Why are you watching him?" Ino averted her gaze and began searching her pack for something substantial. "What makes you think I am interested in Naruto?" She whispered to her, "You were just staring at him like a piece of meat." The Mind Walker shot another glance at the fox teen and said, "I was not, even thought he does look more handsome now." "Naruto is handsome. You got to be kidding." "I'm serious, I saw him when he was looking for a third teammate. He does look a lot better now that he's gotten taller." Sakura actually noticed how much better her longtime teammate looked when she gave him another look, perhaps because of the constant training and missions they were on. He wasn't the squirt he used to be and didn't pester her for dates all the time during their last 2 missions. She noticed that he had a serious side in addition to his playful appearance. Additionally, he appeared when his jacket was unzipped like a typical individual. The words, "Maybe he would look better if we got rid of that orange," were spoken by Sakura to her friend. Considering how he would appear in various attires, Ino asked, "Do you think we should sneak him off to a shop while in Wave or when we get back to Konoha?" As soon as the concept was mentioned, her sense of style went into overdrive. "Not a bad idea, but what about Hinata? You know she has been watching our knuckleheads since the academy," Sakura responded. "That may be true, but it doesn't mean a girl can't have her fun," Ino replied. "Anyways, maybe it will help push her along. I heard she fainted twice when he tried to recruit one of the Team 8 members." "Yeah, but that happens all the time. Ino, she always seemed to give signs that she adored him, but he is so clueless." Sakura began to nibble on her strawberries as Ino sighed and took out a ration bar to eat. "Why is that ideal man no longer living in the village?" Sai lacks emotion. Despite her cuteness, Shikamaru is too lazy to acknowledge that he has feelings for that Suna girl, just like Akamaru. Kiba is a dog. Naruto is left in the dark after Neji gets hung up on 1010. If romance struck him in the head, he most likely wouldn't know what it was, Ino thought. With those whisker lines and that smile of his, he still looks good. Sakura was experiencing similar thoughts. She is correct, he has proven to be more attractive than anyone had anticipated. In addition, he is incredibly resilient and constantly watches out for everyone, even strangers. Regretfully, he is not Sasuke-kun. But then, nobody is. All I can hope is that when we get my Sasuke back, something will be left of him. The Mouton Master's call to pack up jolted the two out of their reverie. After taking a few minutes to stretch and pack up, the group resumed their journey to their destination. Agent 3 arrived at the secret interior of Root headquarters later that night. As she examined what had happened before her arrival, she wandered the dimly lit corridors. Sarutobi Asuma, a former member of the 12 Guardians, was already killed in the encounter with the two Akatsuki members, leaving a lot to be desired. When Agent 5 attempted to approach the zealot and kill him silently, he was easily taken out. They were aware that the two were no match for the S-class criminals, even with the odds leveled. She was also troubled by the subsequent corruption and betrayal by Agent 4. The third object would have attempted to sway her if it was like the first two. Dealing with the crystal finger she was carrying was difficult enough. The fact that the object's trajectory brought it dangerously close to the Sound Village didn't help either. Concerns were raised that the impact the object had on her former teammate would be felt here. She was concerned because it felt sentient. Danzo-sama is probably capable of enduring the effects of this crystal, but what about the other members of Root? Would we be able to cope with it if they were affected by it? As she held the scroll that held the object, she thought, it would be best if I handed this over right away so that Danzo-sama and I could arrange this safely. Through the hallways, the Shrapnel Maiden made her way until she reached his office. There were two guards there, and they saw her right away. They stiffened a little, then moved to block her path in front of the steel doors. One of the guards said in a quiet but firm voice, "Take off your mask and tell your business." "I am 3, she said, taking off her mask, "and I have come to deliver what I was sent to retrieve." Is Danzo-sama in within? The guards recognized her right away. Her piercing green eyes, long ponytail of obsidian hair, and even the edge of her tattoo that protruded from the corner of her neck were all unmistakable. The guards' admiring gaze even landed on her athletic yet well-proportioned figure. It was difficult to avoid becoming irritated by the persistent glance he was giving her. People in Root have consistently made fun of her. She was disgusted by a guard's or an agent's wandering gaze alone. Normally, she would simply disregard those men's twisted behavior, but the crystal was clouding her judgment. She emphasized her current distaste by saying, "I am not going to be dating or letting you in my pants anytime soon, so how about you let me see him sometime today?" It confused the guard and made him a little angry. He began to hear voices in his head telling him to get her to kneel in front of him and slap her around. A voice from a speaker above the door abruptly interrupted all of those thoughts. "Let her in." 3 strode forward and shoved the guard aside. After hearing the order to the guards, she glared at the guard, then opened the door and entered. She was mentally resisting the impulse to strike the guard. She wanted to get rid of the monstrosity because she knew it was the crystal that was affecting her. His workspace resembled a command center. The walls were unadorned and composed of concrete before a desk with a marble top. There was a rug on the floor. 2 oil lamps were on metal stands behind Danzo, who was seated in a big, padded chair. The number of agents was listed on a board along one wall. Oddly, Agents 4 and 5's names were both crossed out. That was noteworthy. She felt uneasy because he already knew the agents were dead. She put that off for later. She handed the scroll to the Root leader and said, "Danzo-sama, Agent 3 reporting in with one of the objects. Agent 4 and 5 are dead." Immediately he opened the scroll and took it in his left hand. As his free hand touched the crystal, Danzo squinted his eyes and appeared to flex his right hand inside the wrappings and sling that were there. He sustained those wounds in the Battle of Kyubi and was a continual reminder of that terrible day. He commanded, "Tell me about the manner of their deaths." 5 died trying to obtain the first object. The 2 Akatsuki members, Hidan and Kakuzu, who took down Sarutobi Asuma, grabbed the red object. He tried to sneak up on Hidan and disable him, but the target quickly impaled him with his scythe. Numbers were not in our favor, so we went to the next objective. He was a promising agent, knew the value of stealth and efficient killing. Continue with the briefing. 3. We approached the second object and came across an aura of hatred projected from it. It was tangible and affected the behavior of 4. I approached the object and examined it. It was a crystal shaped like a bone finger, which you are now holding. I took out a scroll and was going to seal the crystal in it, but was attacked by 4. He was enraged and practically needed the crystal. We fought briefly and I dispatched him. I had already tracked the trajectory of the final object, but it is too close to the Sound Village for a lone agent to retrieve. She reported to her superiors during the briefing. She observed that his face occasionally changed, but dismissed it as her imagination. Danzo found himself in a dark cave. Inside his head, runes in an unidentified language were glowing on the cave's rock walls. His senses were assaulted by the screams of madness and the stench of sulfur and burning flesh. He began to move toward a dim blue light as he descended the cave. After what seemed like an eternity of wandering, Danzo finally caught a glimpse of a bubbling cauldron and a hideous figure hovering above it, waving at it with bony clawed hands. The enormous beast appeared to be floating on a bluish mist and lacked any legs. The spine attached to the beast's torso grew out of the mist. It had a shark-like appearance and slimy skin, a very thin neck, which appeared to be just a tiny mass of fiber, connected the head. It had an oval head that protruded from the sides, only a small mouth was visible, with two tiny nostrils above it that appeared to have been punctured into the skull and a couple of razor-sharp fangs visible additionally. The eyes were stretched, making them appear slanted. Its few wiry long strands of black hair were framed by two thick horns that adorned the top of the head. The aroma emanating from the cauldron was enticing. Danzo inhaled deeply, the aroma energizing him like a rush of adrenaline. His heart pounded and his muscles burned. The aroma itself practically exuded strength and authority. Suddenly, Danzo's mind whirled with examples of what he saw as treachery and dishonor. A voice, dark and maniacal, echoed through the cave with every thought. Once more, he considered Namikaze Minato, the third instate, to be his successor. You were a better leader than that sentimental fool. You were slighted by the old buffoon. He witnessed the great beast inside Naruto being sealed and the Kyuubi attack. Then he witnessed the third foil his efforts to adopt the child and turn him into a living weapon for the village. You were ignored and denied the opportunity to protect the village. Your wisdom was scoffed by your peers. He witnessed him being told to disband his root forces, a special forces created especially to ensure Konoha's safety. Your life's work was seen as traitorous and criminal. You were never appreciated for your efforts. When both of the remaining devoted Sannin were selected for the position of Hokage, he witnessed that he was once more disregarded by the council and elders. It should be you leading this village, molding it in your image. Danzo yelled while staring into the beast's eyes. Yes, I was denied, betrayed, and minimized. Sandaime mocked me and called me a traitor. The council didn't even see I was the most worthy of being Hokage. His face now displayed the anger that had been accumulated over years of what he saw as betrayal and dishonor. And the beast enjoyed it. The beast grew larger and the cauldron's glow intensified. Gazing down at him, it saw the darkness that resided within his soul due to misdirected intentions. The beast was so thrilled by what it saw that it knew it had found its host. You want to make things right, to take control and weed out the weak. Yes, I do. The tree must grow strong. Do you accept your hatred for the fools in the council, the Godem, and Naruto? I do. They will pay for their slights on my honor. The council will fall and be molded in my image. Tsunade will be thrown aside like the garbage she is, and the Yondaime's legacy will either become my weapon or destroyed. The beast waved its hand and produced a brass goblet. The blue bubbling liquid filled the cauldron as it dipped into it. After floating in the air, the goblet sank into Danzo's eager hands. After floating over to him, he glanced back up at the beast and down at the liquid. With a sickly smile, the hovering form exclaimed, "Then accept the gift of my blessing, accept the power built from your hatred, accept the power of Mephisto." Glancing back at the liquid, Danzo raised it to his lips and gulped it down. His body appeared to glow bluish and felt like it was on fire. He felt himself change violently. All of a sudden he noticed that his hands were beginning to get smoky and translucent. He looked up expectantly at the beast as he watched the rest of his body go through these changes. Mephisto grinned back down at him and breathed in Danzo's smoke-filled face. "Let the hatred flow." Danzo's eyes flashed a tiny blue as the shrapnel maiden concluded her briefing before she sensed the overwhelming hatred emanating from her leader. She believed it to be her imagination. She was so sick that she had to will herself to stay upright. Danzo took his injured right hand and, with a sickening crunch, bit off the index finger, spitting the severed digit onto the floor, adding to her nausea until he forced the crystal into his hand's freshly opened socket. Blood poured freely from the wound. The entire space of Danzo's headquarters was suddenly filled with a burst of blue light that rushed out of his eyes, nose, and mouth. The remaining bandages on his arm and head were thrown away as he began to float on the air and his skin began to bubble. His body began to reshape, and there was a sickening crunch as his bones broke. She was aware that Agent 3 had no other option. She was now merely a Konoha shinobi and no longer Agent 3 in that regard. She was aware that she needed to take action against the overwhelming force that Danzo's evolving form radiated. She ran because she was unable to defeat this form on her own. The tower changed during each Hokage's tenure in office. Much like the character of the individual holding the office, the Shodem was the tower's principal architect. He designed the majority of it and it embodied his principles of strength and continuous development. He also added space inside the walls for a sapling to grow. Under the tree that was beginning to take shape, the Nidaime would spend hours relaxing and taking a break from the burgeoning paperwork flow. They also added a koi pond to the area to create a study space. Sarutobi placed a few tables with benches close to the koi pond. The training posts were added off to the side during the Yondaime's rule so he could vent his frustrations over a war that seemed to go on forever, whether it was with actual or imaginary foes. The space had been enlarged and plans for a tiny sleeping area were underway when Sarutobi took up the mantle for the second time. Sadly, those plans didn't materialize until Tsunade assumed the position of chief protector and steward of Konoha. She felt compelled to do so because the sound invasion destroyed the estates of her grandfather and uncle. The slug Sanin and her helper could live comfortably in the modest cottage. The study, 2 bedrooms, a basic kitchen, and an indoor onsen were sufficient for the two, but it was by no means opulent. Tsunade and Shizune were the only people who ever entered the building. That list was restricted to the times when Sakura stayed over after a particularly demanding apprenticeship session or when an Anbu woke her up for any urgent late-night business. The Anbu on guard nearby experienced a spooky atmosphere this evening. It expanded slowly until a glimmer of blue light appeared a short distance away, centered close to the tower's western edge. Immediately after seeing the light increase and then fade, an Anbu captain acted. 3 additional Anbu members wearing black armor moved into flanking positions close to her as she raised her hand. A man wearing an eagle mask and the captain wearing a dragon mask took off for the cottage using a series of hand signals. A second team took the place of the originals as sentries, and the Anbu in the wolf mask ran toward the light source with another in a bear mask. Wolf landed close to a clearing at the far western edge of the Hokage Tower complex, her long dark hair flowing. There was a man-sized grate on the ground in front of her. Interesting. This had never been there before. A genjutsu covering it must have been dispelled by the light and whatever evil energy it carried, she thought as Bear looked around for potential enemies. He pried open the grate after clearing the area, and the two fell down the shaft. Due to the slightly extended fall, the two had to use their feet to brace themselves against the shaft's walls and draw in small amounts of chakra in order to slow their descent. As they landed together, Wolf and Bear could smell the stench of hate permeating the corridor. The passage itself was of plain stone and was poorly lit. The air was suddenly filled with a cacophony of growling, moaning, and other chaotic noises coming from their left. It began slowly at first, but as they heard explosions and running, it got louder. Bear and Wolf nodded to one another and opened a pouch on their belts to reveal pistol-like launchers. From the pistol, each person fired a basic hook and line back up the shaft. They attached the lines to harnesses in their belts after disengaging the lines from the pistols. Soon after, the two Anbu heard the sounds getting louder and waited for the attack to come. In a matter of seconds, a woman with a disheveled ponytail emerged and hurled kunai at an unidentified attacker. Each kunai exploded with a single sign, followed by shrieks of pain and the sound of splattering flesh as her pursuers presented themselves. She didn't stop to rest or celebrate her win. 2 people in dark robes materialized. Hovering just inches off the ground, they all had staffs in their left hands. Their brains were partially exposed, and their heads were bald. Their cheeks were pale and gaunt, and their lips were chapped, exposing long fangs. Each fingertip had long, sharp, angular nails, and their hands appeared bony. They waved their staves and hands without much hesitation. The escape route was obscured by a wall of fire that emerged behind the 2 Anbu. The shrapnel maiden believed she had reached her breaking point. As they struck their targets, she executed the Nenzhou Kinzoku Shinsei on each of her final 4 kunai, which were all charged with her chakra. She relaxed a little when she heard the satisfying sound of splattering flesh and loud explosions, only to discover that the 2 apparitions who had once been her co-workers had used a jutsu she had hardly been able to avoid. She turned to see the wall of demonic flame erupting to life and the 2 Anbu behind her. She frantically told the 2 people standing by their side, "Anbu, we need to get out of here and report to Hokage-sama. Danzo has been possessed." As he examined her, Wolf saw a familiar face. She knew her old academy sensei could perform the jutsu she used from the explosions and the kunai. She nodded to Bear as the voice confirmed her suspicions as Wolf hurled a couple of kunai with exploding tags at the attackers. The man seized the maiden. The passageway erupted with explosions from the tags as the Anbu flipped a seal on their harnesses and the 3 of them rose along the lines. As the 3 leapt to the surface, the enmity from the passageway appeared to be in the air as well. When they arrived at the cottage a few minutes later, they discovered the Hokage and her helper already awake and under the protection of Eagle and their captain, Dragon. When Dragon saw who was with her teammates, she stiffened. "What are you doing here, Aki?" The former root agent recognized the Anbu that was speaking to her right away, and she twitched slightly, revealing her feelings. But this was no moment for happy or unhappy reunions. "Hokage-sama, I have dire news to report about Danzo and his root." Tsunade glanced in the direction of her Anbu captain. The individual in front of her was unknown, but she took pride in knowing every member of the village staff. "You know this person?" As befitted her position, Dragon replied coldly, "This happens to be Mitarashi Akiri, also known as the Shrapnel Maiden. I have not personally seen this person since a month before the Kyubi attack, but she was training her feelings, the most traumatic event in her life. Aside from the suffering her first sensei inflicted on her, was Akiri's disappearance. Tsunade gave a curt order, saying, "Very well Akiri, continue your report. I was originally Agent 3 in Roots Anbu Forcei, along with Agents 4 and 5, was sent by Danzo to acquire the objects that fell from the sky just days ago." Shizune cut in. "The same objects the Kyuubi warned Naruto about?" The blonde Hokage asked. "It seems so. What did Danzo want with the objects?" Tsunade's brow furrowed at the different ideas racing through her head as the shrapnel maiden went over her report. Even an emotionless Root Anbu was not to be taken lightly because it has the power to influence the mental state of anyone nearby. It was difficult to accept that another of these items ended up in the hands of the same Akatsuki who had killed Asuma and were pursuing Naruto. Ultimately, it appeared as though Konoha had the cards stacked against it because one of the items was inside the boundaries of an adversary country. As she contemplated a protracted battle, the blonde Hokage thought, "I guess that omen was not slight in the least." Wolf took the chance to speak, and she snapped out of her reverie. "But how does that explain those people down in the tunnel?" Curious, the Godem asked, "Tunnel? What tunnel are you talking about?" When the light was observed from the guard post, Bear and I traced the source to a grate covering a ventilation shaft inside the tower complex. We dropped down the shaft a distance of 25 meters into a stone passageway. The feeling of malice was intensified there and sounds of a battle approached. Pointing to the shrapnel maiden, the female, she came out of the dark end of the tunnel tossing kunai at an advancing enemy. But not normal ones, they seemed to float on the air and had a ghastly appearance too. Survived her attack and cast a jutsu creating a wall of fire behind us. The three of us escaped out of the tunnel by way of the shaft under cover of exploding tags. The Root headquarters is based in a series of tunnels and underground chambers, most of which lie beneath this tower. Akiri told the group as that realization set in. Tensions increased. Not wanting to start a debate about Root, she wasted no time in moving on with the report. Unfortunately, Danzo has about 40 to 50 agents at his disposal and roughly 2/3 of them are still alive and have already transformed into those beasts. They seem to be able to cast various fire jutsus, but I could not sense any chakra discharge from its use. So this new Danzo has about 30 more of those deformed ninja at his disposal and they aren't using chakra anymore. Tsunade said aloud. "Dragon, how many teams of Anbu can be called up right now?" "There are 4 teams besides mine on patrol that can be called and I can get another 4 within 15 minutes. 9 teams should be enough to handle this. Tell them to work close range and hand to hand," she said. Dragon was about to leave when Akiri stepped in. She pointed to a wound on her left arm and said, "That would not be the best idea. Fire jutsus were not the only thing they could do. I tried close range combat myself in order to bust through a group of them. One of them swiped me with its claws and the experience is not one I would recommend for anyone." Her actions were controlled by her medical protocol, and the Hokage hurried over. Although it was not a deep wound, the 3 tiny scratches were pale purple in color and cold to the touch. The numerous prods to the wound caused no reaction from Akiri. The wound closed after Tsunade applied healing chakra, but it did not return to its natural hue. She questioned her patient, "Did anything strange happen after you were wounded?" The only thing that could be considered strange is that a small red hue formed around the assailant. It seemed to drain the life out of me while the assailant stood a little taller. Akiri responded with solemnity. Dragon said absently, "A leeching jutsu Orochimaru worked on a similar method for a while. I didn't think Danzo related to his agents." In response, Akiri said, "He didn't. Much like these new forms, I am convinced their abilities were derived from the crystal or whatever it contained." According to Tsunade, either way, this hardly changes the equation. "Dragon, get me those Anbu now." After giving the former Root agent a reassuring hand on the shoulder, the Anbu in question nodded and left to carry out her duties. The shrapnel maiden raised his head and stared into the scaled mask of the Anbu. She tried to look at the person underneath the mask for a moment. The Anbu took off with a simple shoulder grab, leaving Akiri wondering who it was and how she knew her. She had no idea that while Anbu was grinning, she was also concerned about her older sister. The streets of Konoha were usually deserted at this hour of the night. Only those on patrol or guard would be awake after a long day of shinobi training and duties or a long day of villagers' labor. The exception that altered reality would be tonight. A few particular individuals answered the call of their inner rage after the village was overtaken by a surge of malevolent energy and hateful intent. 5 elder statesmen weaved their way through the streets like moths on their way to an unidentified flame. When 2 elders met, they acknowledged each other's presence for a brief moment before moving on. Each elder walked in a daze, oblivious to the hatred that had grown inside of them due to perceived slights of honor or disagreements over allowing a child with blonde hair to live. The group eventually arrived at a small steel door located 100 meters from the tower wall's western edge. Normally, The door would have been concealed by a complex genjutsu and a chakra masking agent, but Root's concealments were completely destroyed by the energy wave. As the 5 elders waited patiently for the person they were looking for, there was a slight rumbling behind the door. The door creaked open with a moan, and a group of vampire ghouls positioned themselves around the entrance. A bluish mist roared from the tunnel as the final ghoul stood in its spot. A lone figure appeared from that mist, sitting on it as though it were floating. The 5 elders, including the leader of the Haruno, Homura, Kaharu, and 2 members of the Hyuga, hardly recognized Danzo because of the X-shaped scar on his face. His hair was all gone, and the top of his head seemed to have flattened and stretched. His chin grew sharp and jagged. His cane was thrown away, and his left arm and eye were restored as he moved to a central position in front of the group. His 2 legs appeared to be fused, and he never touched the ground. The newly formed Apostle of Hell said, "You have been chosen as my counsel. Do you accept the gift of hatred that is to be bestowed upon you?" Each of the 5 bowed to their new master. He cut open his left wrist, allowing his lifeblood to flow, a talon sticking out from his long bony fingers. Presenting the bloody appendage to the Haruno leader, Danzo, Mephisto said, "Come, drink from me and be reborn." Sucking down every drop of blood as though it were life-giving nectar, the middle-aged, pink-haired woman accepted the offering with avarice. Her body changed gradually as she drank. Her sandals split open due to the growth of her feet from her toes and each heel. Thick, curved talons protruded. The same talons from the remaining digits joined the middle fingers. Her skin became leathery and reddish in color. All humanity that had once existed was gone. The eyes turned into black voids. The 4 surviving elders underwent similar metamorphoses before an eerie cackle woke the slumbering Konoha residents. "Go forth, my loyal council, gather our flock, raise the fallen, let the righteous tremble under our might. Within hours, Konoha's light will fall." Country of Waves Kakashi, Naruto, and Sakura were standing at the base of the bridge they had previously assisted in defending early the following evening. 2 mounds of rocks, one with a mask split in 2 resting atop it, were off to the right under the shade of a large tree. As the 3 of them got closer to the graves they had painstakingly constructed, a wave of nostalgia passed over them. Kakashi recalled the young shinobi's deed of self-sacrificing to save his master. It was Sakura's first encounter with combat and her first realization that she needed to strengthen herself still. Naruto would never forget the words spoken by the boy in the kimono behind the mask as he picked herbs. Naruto's Nindo was born between his explanation of the source of true strength and Kakashi's own motto, and he has always been grateful to the fallen shinobi. Naruto thought to himself, "I hope I can see you again and properly thank you for your guidance, Haku Dono, after all my battles are over." Since he believed it was disrespectful to not address someone with more friendliness, he had never before used terms of respect for anyone. Haku would be the only one who didn't. He believed that the Hyutan wielder was the only one who truly deserved respect. He was distracted from his inner thoughts by a fleeting glance toward his master's grave. He noted, Kakashi-sensei, Zabuza's Zanpato is missing. The only acknowledgement the masked ninja gave was a simple, "Hi." "Is that all you can say?" Sakura asked, never one to keep her thoughts to herself. "There is nothing we can do about it right now, Sakura. Maybe after this is over, we can make some inquiries, but I doubt it will stay missing for long," Kakashi countered. "Why is that?" inquired Naruto from behind the group. Sai said, "A sword like that is usually unwielded by someone bound for a bingo book." "Gomen Kakashi-sensei, but Yamato-sensei wants to get moving." With a nod, the 3 paid their final respects to the deceased before leaving to join the others. A raven took to the skies from the tree that overlooked the gravesite as the Konoha ninja made their second approach to the bridge. The Genin and Shunin were alerted by its swift circling pass around the group, while the 2 Junin simply took note of its presence. The raven darted across the bridge after the pass was made. With a kunai ready, Naruto scanned the area and asked, "Kuso, was that one of Itachi's ravens?" Shikamaru put his hand on the orange-clad ninja's shoulder and said, "Calm down, Naruto. I didn't sense anything from the raven." With his eyes darting back and forth, Naruto answered, "You sure? The bridge would be a good place for an ambush." The raven returned to the inn and landed on a windowsill on the 2nd floor while the group debated the likelihood of an Akatsuki attack. After twice tapping the window with its beak, a powerful tanned hand opened it. The bird was dismissed with 2 caws. "The group from Konoha is here." My scout put one of the group, outfitted in a black and orange jumpsuit, on edge and looking for an attack. Barrick said simply. After giving a nod, Alexia went to the dining room downstairs while Celine and Anstrom were chatting with Tazuna and Kane by a fireplace about local events. Inari and Tsunami were there setting the dining table for the evening meal. Coughing to get their attention, she spoke to the audience. "Anyone want to go with me to greet our new guests?" While Tazuna and Tsunami merely chuckled, Inari hurried out of the room with a smile. The bridge builder said, I suppose Inari is excited to see his Nissan. I guess I will be going as well. Barrick appeared beside Alexia and stated, my scouts sensed one or more of the group had some sort of bestial connection. When the druid had finished speaking, Inari hurried back into the room. Strangely enough, he was wearing a jumpsuit that was blue and orange and that his Oji-san and Kasen had seen before. He had a blank blue ite tied to his head. Tazuna and Tsunami both laughed at what they saw. If you really wanted to be like Naruto, you should have dyed your hair blonde and gotten whisker tattoos. The elderly gentleman replied. He quickly changed his statement after his daughter gave him a sharp jab in the arm. Of course, you wouldn't be allowed to get tattoos. Gomen, but this is the only ninja gear I got. You won't let me go to the store to buy better equipment. Inari was grumbling. You are not going to become a ninja. I told you this before, Tsunami said. Nissan would let me, protested the boy. He probably would train me. The assassin was given a headache after just 1 minute of the mother-son argument. She yelled, enough, and put an end to the altercation. We need to get going. Before running out of the room and out the door toward the bridge that bears his hero's name, Inari only needed to hear it. The other 3 members of the welcoming party sighed collectively and began chasing after the child. Before the 2 teams crossed the bridge, Naruto needed to be calmed down for 15 minutes. As they watched, the 3 who had previously been there reflected on past experiences and missed friends. Only Shikamaru, the impromptu leader of Team 10, and the remaining members of the group wanted the first part of the mission to be finished. He didn't want to show it, but he was annoyed by how slowly the mission was going. By the time they got back to Konoha, he was certain that the trail would have been abandoned. He saw a figure in orange and blue approaching from a distance. As he combed through his thoughts, when the shadow user saw what he was certain was a young Naruto in his old orange jumpsuit approaching him, he briefly believed he was sitting in a time warp. Sakura also observed it and voiced her opinion. Anyo Naruto, did you leave a cage bunchen here when we left last time? The statement left the blonde ninja speechless. Why would I spend so many years leaving a clone here? When he finally saw what the others had seen, he thought. As the figure drew closer, he saw that the individual was not like him in terms of having blonde hair or whiskers. The individual in the orange outfit turned to yell at the group behind him after waving at them, hurry up, it's Naruto Nissan. Sakura and Naruto responded in unison as realization hit them both. Inari? As Inari and his welcoming party drew closer, Yamato, Sai, and Team 10 gathered around the remains of Team 7 when Tazuna emerged behind Inari. The trio of blonde, pink, and silver-haired people recognized him right away, but nobody knew the outdoorsman or the woman who accompanied the elderly inebriated man. He shook hands with his idol in a warrior's manner as soon as Inari was within arm's reach. Welcome back, Nissan, Sakura Nichan, Kakashi-san, nice to see you 3 again, how are things? Before responding, Naruto absorbed the image of what appeared to be his previous self. Inari developed in a variety of ways. He appeared fit and slender, and the orange jumpsuit appeared to be a size too small. The Konoha genin asked, everything is going well, Inari. What are you doing with one of my old jumpsuits? It isn't my fault that you left one of them behind. I would have liked it better if Kasen would have let me buy better gear and outfits, Inari said with a huff. Tazuna joined the group and said, don't mind my grandson, it seems he is still dead set on following in your footsteps, Naruto-kun. Shaking his fist at the bridge builder, Naruto laughed, and there is something bad about following my great example, you old drunk? Gazing at the group, Tazuna said, not at all, Naruto-kun, but my daughter disagrees. He failed to notice a teenager with raven hair in the group for some reason. What happened to that Uchiha that ran with you? Is Sasuke too busy to come? The former members of Team 7 then lowered their heads in somber remembrance when none of the 3 responded. Yamato filled in the details as they were introduced. Each member of the group waved, bowed, or smiled politely. Tazuna-san. Sasuke-isa, you can say, tied up in other affairs at the moment. I am Yamato. With us are Shikamaru, Ino, Choji, and Sai. Tazuna introduced the 2 guests, saying, let me introduce you to 2 of my guests. To my left is Alexia and to my right is Barrick. Kakashi asked the bridge builder, I assume these are 2 of Deckard Cain's friends. As another raven swooped down and landed on the wide shoulders of the man wearing animal pelts, he said, hi, the rest of their group and Cain himself are back at our inn with Tsunami. She is getting dinner ready for us. When the bird landed and cawed at the man, Naruto stiffened with a nod. The man produced a handful of grain from a pouch, which the raven pecked at. Astounded by how peacefully the bird ate while perched on the man's strong shoulder, Ino inquired, so that was your pet that we saw earlier? In a deep, guttural voice, the druid answered, I wouldn't call him a pet. He is one of my scouts and a trusted ally, as are many of my woodland friends. Curiously, Yamato said, I thought only Itachi had a summoning contract with the ravens. Barrack told the ninjas in front of him, I am a druid and am one with nature, its forces and beasts work with me in all things, including battle. I have no contract with these ravens. Alexia patted the claws slashed on her hips and remarked, sunset is coming, and I would rather be inside. We can save the rest of the get-to-know stuff for at the dinner table. A hawk descended and landed on Kakashi's extended arm just before the group made their way back to Tazuna's inn. As the group watched in interest, the former Anbu untied the note on its back and read it over for a minute. After absorbing the message, Yamato took on a hardened appearance and he handed him the note. Shikamaru spoke up after observing the two experienced ninjas' response. What happened? Did our orders change? As he left for the inn, the Mokuton user curtly replied, we will discuss this after we eat. Few words were exchanged as the group made their way back despite quick introductions for the other members of Alexia's party and some catch-up between Team 7 and Tsunami, Inari, and Tazuna. The pattern persisted. The two convergent groups gathered around the fireplace after a good hot meal. As Naruto quickly surveyed the group they had come to escort, he noticed one dark-skinned man using his eyes to pierce him. The man kept his eyes on Naruto and fingered a crucifix hanging in front of his green tunic. For a brief moment his glare uncannily recalled those he had received from Neji or the Hyuga elders. Before he softened, it was a look of self-righteousness and contempt. I wonder what's wrong with him. Naruto made the decision to speak with him about it later. After everyone had taken their seats, Kakashi began a briefing. It appears things have changed in Konoha. We will not be heading back anytime soon. Tazuna, do you know if there are vacancies at the different inns and hotels in Wave? There are some, but this is a popular time of the year for tourism. How much room do we need? About 50 shinobi, the Hokage, and over 100 villagers, along with twice that wounded, Kakashi grumbled. With a start, Naruto stood up. Wounded? What happened? With firmness, Yamato responded. The message did not say, but unfortunately Tsunade-sama had to evacuate Konoha. The message did say one thing. We were supposed to ask if a blue crystal and the name Mephisto meant anything. The sanctuary group stiffened at the mention of that name, recalling the battles in Kurast. It felt like history was being repeated to them. Country of rice. Since Sasuke killed the snake Sanin, a lot of things have fallen apart in Orochimaru's bases and labs. The task of trying to pick up the pieces fell to the Kabuto, the medic nin with the glasses. Few people were aware of the true motivation behind his devoted follow of Orochimaru. Some believed it to be retaliation against Konoha. It may be the freedom to try new things. According to some theories, Kabuto simply chuckled at those notions. There was only one reason he was there. Orochimaru served only as a tool. Kabuto aspired to have a clinical mind and rule the world. In Konoha, where he was born, that objective could not have been achieved, so he looked for education and safety elsewhere. He met Orochimaru by chance, and Kabuto saw an opportunity to learn and remain hidden in him. In the end, his time with the Sannin would have given him the strength and knowledge necessary to overcome him. Now that Orochimaru had been vanquished, he was left with only the remains of the Sannin in his own laboratory records. With the help of those things and his own capacity for regeneration, he should be able to increase his power and outlive the Uchiha. Then the strange objects started to fall from the sky. When one of the items ended up in the Akatsuki's hands, he was alerted by the spies he still had in the various countries, though she was unable to recover the second object before the victor took it to her leader. Another spy happened upon the brawl between the root agents. The power equation was altered just by that. In addition to lagging behind Konoha's power curve, his sound now lagged even more behind those masked criminals. He was then left to attempt to acquire the final item. His scouts said it was within the boundaries of Rice Country, roughly 20 leagues away from the main laboratory. After dispatching one of his finest squads to retrieve the item, he now stood patiently awaiting the outcome. On the medic nin's face was a smile. He possessed a lot of patience, which will eventually pay off, particularly if he can combine the secrets discovered within Orochimaru with whatever power that object may possess. It will be time to strike. As soon as he does on that day, Konoha and the Akatsuki will be defeated by his sound. He would continue his experiments on the corpse of the White Snake and the few remaining test subjects until those things happened. The Tazuna's inn. After the Anbu captain announced that Konoha was evacuated, there was a brief period of silence. Every shinobi was engaged in an internal conflict over whether to return to Konoha or to remain in their sorrow and anxiety. Long before any of the ninja in attendance were even born, Konoha stood for years and years. It carried the wounds and scars from innumerable conflicts and assaults. It withstood an invasion by one of the three fabled Sannin, and even the awful Kyuubi. It must have been tragic for Tsunade, one of the two surviving Sannin and Godem Hokage, to have to evacuate with so few people and shinobi. Everything seemed to start over for the sanctuary heroes. They were resuming the war they had fought to end. Kurast was corrupted by Mephisto's hatred, And Konoha has now done the same. I hope they won't have to back down too much before they can fully fight back. Anstrom took this the worst out of all of them on the 75th anniversary of Mephisto's initial defeat in Travincal. He was born. His mother, Zatanna, was a stunning and lovely dark-skinned woman with flowing black hair and dazzling hazel eyes who served as a priestess of Zakarum. Stromgard, his father, was a tall, powerful Zakarum knight. When Stromgard first saw the stunning holy woman, he was unfazed by the fact that a priestess and a knight were normally not even permitted to eat together. A year to the day after they first met, they consummated their frenzied and intensely private romance on their wedding night. They were happy when their son was born and persuaded the ruling council to allow them to remain married. When a wave of hatred swept through the city 2 years later, they were forced to leave after years of training under his father. He made a commitment to return to his homeland and free it from Mephisto's control. It's all happening again now. A fresh wave of refugees is escaping the hatred that Mephisto's miserable hands have sparked. They will see their homelands freed long before the quarter-century Karast had to wait. If I have anything to say about it, Anstrom promised. The Horadric sage's piercing voice snapped everyone out of their reverie. Mephisto is one of the 3 prime evils. 3 brothers who rule hell. Their goal is to conquer realms of humanity and finally break down the gates of heaven. The forces of heaven and hell have always been in constant struggle, and their battles have spilled over from time to time onto our worlds. That's what I perceived as evil. I felt like it was familiar. Kyuubi reverberated in Naruto's head. Are you familiar with this Mephisto? Naruto questioned his renter. Yes, but we won't discuss it until after that sage has finished speaking. Naruto's trance was broken when the fox said, "Someone has noticed you not paying attention." The fox then cut off the mental link. When Naruto looked up, he noticed that the stately paladin and the enormous druid were both giving him odd looks. The paladin glared more scathingly than the druid, who appeared intrigued. He tried to ease the tension by smiling at the two and turning back to the elderly sage. The blue crystal must have been a recreation of his soul stone. The soul stones were supernatural crystals that the 3 were sealed into. Each one managed to escape their prison and wreak havoc upon the world. We originally destroyed Mephisto's soul stone after his defeat by fighting our way to Hell's Forge and using the smith's hammer on it. Ultimately, Baal, the Lord of Destruction and Mephisto's brother, was defeated as well, but not before corrupting the World Stone. Tyrael, one of Kami's archangels, was forced to destroy the World Stone before Baal's influence on it forced the gates of hell to open permanently, turning our world into a stronghold for their forces. Baal had somehow managed to leech some part of Mephisto and his other brother Diablo into shards of the destroyed World Stone. When Tyrael sent us here to your realm, they must have followed inside of those crystals, Kane said. Kakashi looked up from his orange book and said, "That is a bit much to take in. So you are saying that this Mephisto, one of the rulers of Makai, is the one who took over Konoha? You also are saying that his ultimate goal is to conquer this world and others along his way to bring down heaven itself." Mai told the group, "We've fought them before, even though it might seem too weird or unrealistic to believe. The only way we won was taking them down one at a time after slowly taking down their forces. If you can break them into smaller groups, they are not as difficult to defeat in a mass, as they prefer to fight. Even the best fighter is overwhelmed." It doesn't explain how he would take over Konoha so quickly. Sakura said, "Tsunade-sama would not have abandoned Konoha easily. I remember what my mother and father stated about the how Mephisto slowly turned the populace of Travincal and the rest of Karast away from the light. His presence seems to spread pure hatred, and over time, even the most pure soul is corrupted." Anstrom told the Konoha shinobi, if for some reason an amount of hatred was already present, he could have easily taken control at a faster pace. Upon hearing those words, Naruto hung his head at last. It did happen. The village's animosity toward me has returned to haunt them. But Konoha fell as a result. All I can hope is that Ero Sennin and Bachan are doing well. When we reached Karast, Alexia continued, the landscape was changed. A vast jungle overtook the outlying villages. The villagers were transformed into zealots and pygmies that constantly swarmed us. Some of the town guard had become rampaging behemoths and vampiric mages. Even the town council was corrupted into these strange demonic priests. If something similar happened in Konoha, your leaders had to fight off possessed citizens. Everyone paused for a moment to process that bit of knowledge. They had previously repelled invading armies and S-ranked criminals, but it must have been the most difficult thing to be attacked from within by your neighbors. Shikamaru questioned, has anyone found a way to free them from Mephisto's spell? The remote chance that he might even have to fight a member of his clan would be too much to bear, he thought. The paladin raised his voice softly. My most powerful holy auras and prayers were only able to give redemption for their souls. I have never been able to remove Mephisto's taint. With a sigh, Yamato decided what to do. We should send a party out to help escort Hokage-sama's party here. We have no clue if any of Mephisto's new forces will be in pursuit, so it might be best if our two groups intermixed. Mai crossed her arms beneath her many assets, and said, I agree, we have no idea who your party is, but you have no real experience dealing with the armies of Mephisto. It would be a tactical blunder to stay in our normal groups, for the time being. Very well, Alexia said. We will shuffle our teams around to have members of both old teams. I will stay here with Kane and Mai to help defend this area and prepare for the refugees. Kakashi noted, it would be best if Team 10 stayed back as well. However, an irate Choji abruptly interrupted. Are you saying that we aren't ready for a combat rescue mission? If you are holding us back? On the contrary, your skills are necessary here. Shikamaru will be needed here for planning of facilities for those we will be escorting back, as well as any necessary defense of this area. Ino will be needed to set up a field hospital, and you are best suited to complement them. Choji. Kakashi responded with the serious demeanor of a soldier. If it is any consolation, I am staying behind as well. Sakura inquired, Kakashi-sensei, why don't you join us? I am the most familiar with the area. Normally I would prefer to keep all of our team behind, but you are needed to help the wounded make it here. Naruto's abilities would be best served keeping whatever enemy force off of the retreating shinobi, and you already know why Yamato is going with you. The silver-haired Junin replied as he glanced companion. Naruto wasn't listening to everyone's plans as intently. The Jinchuriki had gone to a nearby window and peered out. As soon as the Horadric sage was done, his eyes were red, the pupils were slits, and he could hardly see his reflection in the window. I suppose I have a lot of work ahead of me. All I can hope for is that Bachan is okay, Naruto thought gravely. He didn't think about things very often, but he recalled the first time he had met her before that altercation with Orochimaru. He believed her to be merely a drunken gambling idiot. He could see how hurt she was by the losses she had suffered over the years. They developed a somewhat hostile but affectionate bond over time. She became the closest thing to a mother in Naruto's life, though he would never acknowledge it. In Naruto's mind, his reflection calmly answered, Don't worry about her, Kit. If those three are present, there is a long road ahead. Are you certain about that? She might not be able to handle things if you are aware of these guys. With a hint of fear, Naruto said. The Yondaime barely stopped you. To whom do you believe you are speaking? I'm more than a little kid who was born yesterday. I am aware of what I am discussing. You should pay attention. With eyes that glowed a deeper shade of red, the Kyuubi Naruto reflection roared. All right, Baka Kitsune. Tell me what you know about the three, please, Naruto asked in a voice that only caused the demon fox to snarl. Knowing you, it would take decades to figure out their names alone. Take that tone one more time, and I'll let you figure this out on your own. Kyuubi always detested Naruto's smiles, which were so sickly sweet and fake that they made him want to retch, but Naruto smiled back. Calm down, you know I am going to be up against them sooner or later. Best let me know more now instead of later, especially if you want to stay alive. The demon was persuaded that Naruto would follow the rules. After Naruto blanched at the thought. Smile like that again and I'll start screwing with your dreams. Endless dreams of burning ramen stands ought to make you behave. Now that I have your attention, maybe I can explain without you being your normal smartass self. The realms under creation were established as part of the covenant between Kami and Lucifer to ultimately decide which was better, good or evil. Lucifer ruled Makai and all of its rings as the ultimate warden. And Kami and Lucifer are prohibited from direct involvement under the covenant until Lucifer took a mate and had 3 sons. The prime evils were those 3 sons? That's right, Kit. They were born from a soul that Lucifer wanted. He gave that soul a body, and the 3 were born from their union. At first, Lucifer had 9 lesser demons serve as his gatekeepers on each ring of Makai. I was the gatekeeper of the 9th ring, and I enjoyed my job keeping the worst of the worst souls in line. Once the 3 were born and reached adulthood, they attempted to take over all of creation, including Kami's realm. When they were sealed after their first defeat, not all of their essence was sealed and part lingered back to Makai. Naruto asked inquisitively, Anoa, we were just told that they were actually sealed into crystals called soulstones. How could they only be partially sealed? Before a hand on his shoulder snapped him out of his trance-like conversation with his mirror. He shook his head, sat down, and turned to see Kakashi staring at him. Are you ready, Naruto? Your entire team is waiting. We're heading out this evening? He asked startlingly. Hey, it's best to leave as soon as you can. Was there anything he wanted to say? The veteran Team 7 leader inquired. We never got to the end of our conversation, but he knew them. I am not sure I would be asking him all of the right questions, Naruto sighed, adding, for this kind of information, I am not sure I want to be giving it second-hand. Well, maybe we can figure something out after everyone comes back. With a purpose, Naruto approached the door. You're right, Sensei, right now. Getting to Bachin is one of our more pressing priorities. As Team Kakashi, under Yamato's leadership, went outside, Barrack approached his room to retrieve his armor and weapons, and Shikamaru and Kakashi joined Alexia, Mai, and Tazuna in a conference room to discuss preliminary plans for the refugees and Wave's defense. This left Celine and Anstrom alone by the fireplace, where Celine could see the turmoil simmering behind her companion's frown during their journey. They were paired on separate missions and saved each other's lives numerous times, and eventually they developed a bond that allowed them to quickly recognize when the other was in distress, as the holy warrior was now. "Get rid of it. What has caused you such annoyance?" With a loving touch on his shoulder, the statuesque sorceress asked. "It seems like there was something wrong with that blonde teenager," Anstrom said grimly. "I sensed a demonic presence emanating from him," which made Celine gasp. "You don't think he was one of the three spies in hiding or possessed like the Wanderer was, do you? Particularly in the presence of our hosts. He exuded kindness and carelessness. Wasn't he the one who had his name attached to that bridge?" "That might be, but who can tell what might have changed since his last visit?" As he got up to return to his room, the paladin cautioned, "Remember that the Wanderer was once a hero of Tristram before he succumbed to Diablo in his own mind. In any case, we had better put on our armor. We might face a difficult battle. We'll watch this Naruto while we search for the refugees. We'll deal with him then if he gets out of control." Celine took in his words and became alarmed as he went upstairs. All she could hope was that her close friend wouldn't act hastily against the boy. She sighed and went upstairs to get her rod and armor. Nothing in this life can ever be easy, can it? Country of Fire, with all the self-assurance and dignity a vanquished leader could muster, Tsunade surveyed her tattered and jaded band of villagers and shinobi. Everything she valued in the village she had vowed to defend and cultivate was diminished to the motley crew that was marching, with a few storage scrolls filled with archives and clan treasures that were divided among the surviving shinobi. "What a heartbreaking sight. I sincerely apologize, Dan, Oji-san, and Noiki. As a Hokage, I failed." She suppressed her tears and thought, if only there was something else I could have done, but the numbers were just too many. A reassuring hand touched her shoulder. Normally, she would have punched him so hard that he would have been sent sailing through the night sky if he had touched her in any way. Rather, she nodded to Jiraiya, a fellow Sannin and former teammate. Not even the powerful Toad Sage fared any better. The attacks of those who were converted by Mephisto caused a lot of his regular clothing to be torn and burned. A thin layer of soot, dirt, and dried blood covered his skin and hair, creating a strange camouflage. "Don't dwell on it. There was not much we could do, and we saved everyone and everything we could," he said quietly. Taking a deep breath, she walked around the caravan that had been mobilized. Team Kakashi and Team 10 had received the message a full day ago because they had left Konoha 36 hours earlier under the cover of different jutsus, including Jiraiya's Swamp of the Underworld. They were able to push through and cover 30 leagues as they trudged on. The villagers who had not given in to the atmosphere of hatred were dragging. Groups of shinobi guarded the caravan in front of and behind the villagers. Groups of wagons were positioned in the middle of the formation to transport the injured, being attended to by Shizune and other medical staff, as well as any belongings they were able to salvage. What remained of the Anbu forces darted along the tree line on either side of the road. Only 3 squads survived from the squads she was able to call up and those already on patrol. Tsunade dropped back into the group's pace and reached back to where Jiraiya was positioned, close to the back of the caravan. The Toad Sage asked his Hokage, "Do you think they will hold up?" Tsunade shivered as she recalled her fleeting glimpse of the creature that Danzo transformed into. "They should. If everything holds like this, I doubt anyone would attack a group this size, but seeing what we fought against, who knows what the undead would do at the control of this Mephisto." Abruptly, the caravan's front began to rumble. One of the Anbu teams arrived on the scene right away before one of the aforementioned Anbu hurried back. The 2 Sannin attempted to determine the nature of the disturbance. The Anbu presented his report with a salute and a small bow. "Hokage-sama, a pack of wolves and a flock of ravens approached the front of the caravan only to turn around and retreat back up the trail. They appeared to move in unison, so it is possible they could be summons." "Very well, have your captain and the rest of your squad take post near the front. I will be up there shortly. Have the lead team slow the pace of the march." The confident Hokage instructed. The Anbu nodded and dashed back to the column's head. With curiosity, Jiraiya inquired, "Suspecting a trap?" As she prepared to advance to the front, Tsunade remarked, "There is no telling. Ravens usually are Itachi's trademark, but I never seen nor heard of him using them as such obvious scouts. That isn't what troubles me. I guess you are more concerned about the wolves. I never have seen a wolf summoned before. I heard of there being a contract for them but never knew anyone who signed it." Before she leapt to a position next to the lead shinobi team, she gave the order, "Exactly, and with the appearance of moving in unison with the ravens makes this a mystery I want solved. Stay here and keep a watch on our rear flank." With their sensei off active duty and the injured, Team Kurenai was already lagging behind the curve. It couldn't get much worse given what has happened to Hinata lately. The attack significantly reduced the Hyuga's numbers. Nearly every member of the main branch was already dead, in the medical wagons, or converted. One member of the team that assisted in covering their retreat was her father. She didn't know what had happened to her father and hadn't seen or spoken to him since the retreat. Neji and the rest of Team Guy stood about 50 meters to the left. Neji proudly displayed his Hite 8 on his left bicep as he stood with his team. A group of people appeared on the horizon before she could lose herself in her thoughts any further. In order to maintain the essential visual gifts of her clan, she raised the veins in her eyes and around her eye sockets with a simple hand gesture. Activating her Byakugan, she zoomed in and saw 7 individuals running in their direction. The 7 individuals who stepped forward appeared somewhat out of place from left to right. Over a green tunic, a dark-skinned man wore an elaborate metal collar and a shining silver breastplate. He also wore silver shin guards over his tan pants. He had a domed gray shield over his right forearm and a strange gold and red scepter in his left hand. The dark leather of his boots and gloves was encrusted with gray chain metal. The woman beside him was dark-skinned, well-proportioned, and wearing purple armor. It appeared to emit an odd light that wasn't caused by the sun. A rod that resembled a claw with a blue sphere in its clutches was in her left hand. A huge man wearing leather armor lined with fur stood close to her. Many wooden and bone ornaments were wrapped around his long ponytail, which was neatly tied. He wore it as a helmet, and the ponytail hung out from what appeared to be a red-eyed wolf's head. He held an ivory-trimmed spiked mace in his right hand, with 3 gemstones set beneath the mace's ball. He had a big black shield with a golden hawk emblem on his left. She didn't recognize those 3 at first, but she smiled shyly when she saw Sakura's pink hair and red outfit, as well as Naruto's black and orange jumpsuit. She turned to look at her cousin Neji, who was also grinning when he signaled to stop the caravan. Tsunade approached him closely. "What is it, Neji?" He answered calmly. "Naruto and his team are approaching with 3 armored people with them, 2 male and 1 female." She turned to the rest of the caravan and gave the hand signal to stop the column, saying, "Arigato, Neji, keep eyes on the people accompanying Team Kakashi." As soon as Barrack announced that the refugees had been spotted, Naruto began to sprint. He traveled far enough on the trail in a few minutes to witness the group forming in one spot. He looked through the throng of wagons and people until he found the person he was looking for. With hope, he said, "Sakura-chan, that isn't an illusion, is it?" With a sigh, his medic teammate shook her head in response. "No, Naruto, that is definitely Hokage-sama." That made the blonde run as fast as he could to the group ahead. Celine turned to Yamato, who was pinching the bridge of his nose, as she saw him running ahead of their group. The sorceress asked sweetly, "Does he always act like that?" Unfortunately, Naruto has always been one that was acted on his emotions, especially to ones he has deemed precious to him, or at least ever since I knew him. The captain of the Anbu responded sadly. After hearing that remark, Anstrom became perplexed. He had sensed a demonic presence earlier, but that wouldn't compare. No demon that he was aware of would value a human being in any way. Why does the boy have such a demonic aura about him if he has human emotions? He asked himself this question. When Naruto saw the Hokage, he was within 50 meters. He changed his course to where she was as soon as he recognized her. A pair of Anbu approached Tsunade upon noticing this, and she simply smirked and waved them away. He saw Team Guy and Team 8 in front of her, serving as scouts, when he was within 15 meters using chakra to power his feet. Naruto leapt over their head and landed precisely in front of the blonde Hokage. The Jinchuriki's face was filled with worry as he asked, "Bachan, I was so worried, are you alright?" Tsunade was going to ignore that remark for a moment, but Naruto did not have good fortune. He was flat on the ground after she reached out and gave him a bonk on the head. "How many times? I told you not to call me that, Gaki." Yeah, I love you too. Seriously, you are not hurt at all," complained Naruto, picking himself up off the ground. She smiled softly and said, "I appreciate the concern, but I am fine. Did you accomplish your team's mission?" In answer to her question, Naruto stood with pride. "Of course, you didn't honestly believe we would fail at all, right?" She gave his hair a shake. She saw the rest of Naruto's group arrive at her location and said, "Never a doubt, Naruto. Yamato, who did you bring with you?" Anstrom answered her question before he could reply, waving at each individual in turn. "Allow me to introduce myself and my compatriots. I am Anstrom, Knight of Zakaram. This wise woman is Lady Celine, and our burly partner here is Barrack of Barner's druidic clan. We are associates of one Deckard Cain, whom I believe was to be escorted to you before the taint of Mephisto plagued your land." The slug Sanin's face instantly twisted into a frown. "You know of that beast that possessed my villagers and shinobi?" The druid's deep voice repeated, "We fought him before. That can be discussed later. My allies and scouts saw and caught the scent of the wounded. I suggest we move quickly." Before concentrating his mana and chanting in a language that the other ninja couldn't understand, Anstrom said, "I could help with healing these souls who were afflicted by that devil's minions." The sorceress gently touched her holy companion, causing him to awaken from his reverie. "There is no need save your strength for until we get back to the inn. It would be best to get everyone there now." As he reached the group, the gray-haired Toad Sanin said, "Well, Gaki, you brought some interesting friends with you. You could say that again. Arrow Senin, you should see his wolves. They just appeared from the trees in a shimmer of energy. They were more civil than your toads, even though I don't mind Gamakichi," replied Naruto. Their nascent argument was abruptly interrupted by a blue flash. Everyone turned to watch as a large blue circular portal opened and a scroll with a blue ribbon unfolded. The paladin questioned his ebony-skinned sorceress. "I hate to complain in the sight of your intelligence, but how do we know that the portals will work like it did in Sanctuary?" She gave him a knowing smile. In return, she turned and entered the portal, vanishing as soon as she passed the event horizon. "I placed a waypoint anchor 100 paces from the inn. It should be fine, but I will check since I have more than one portal scroll." Country of Waves Shikamaru was smoking a cigarette and gazing out from the bridge, wondering how Asuma-sensei could eat so many of these cancer sticks in a single day. He coughed a little. About 40 to 50 meters away, a burst of blue light appeared off his left shoulder. He turned to see the dark-skinned woman from Kane's group just leave and enter a blue circle of light, only to have the circle vanish as soon as she entered it again. He muttered to no one in particular, shaking his head. What a troublesome waste of time that was. Country of Fire. The majority of the ninja watched in wonder as Celine reappeared through the portal, only to have it blink out of existence and the scroll break up into smoke vapors as she arrived. "As you can see," she said with assurance, "everything is working just fine with the portals. We can have everyone move through and be back at the inn within moments." Being the talkative and enthusiastic student, Naruto opened up. "Sugoi. That was so cool. How do those scrolls work? Can you teach me how to do that?" Happy to instruct a motivated student, Celine said, "I don't see why not. The incantations are not that complex to inscribe on the scroll." However, Anstrom became irate. During that exchange, Tsunade also observed the paladin's shift in attitude. She broke up their jokes because she felt the need to put a swift end to this possible altercation. "You can ask about that later, Naruto. Right now we have people to get to shelter, if you please, Lady Celine." The Konohan refugees were led through the new portal by the sorceress, who bowed and unfolded another scroll from her pack. 20 minutes later, only Naruto, Tsunade, Jiraiya, and Celine remained. Jiraiya asked his student, "What do you think, Gaki? Ready to go through?" Naruto grinned broadly and said, "Let's go, you old perv. I need to introduce you to my apprentice when you get there." Lady Tsunade said, "You got an apprentice, brat?" As he entered the portal, he joyfully responded, "Of course I do. He even has taken up my love of the color orange." With a sigh, the two Sannin looked at one another incredulously. To his former teammate, Jiraiya posed the question, "So who burns the outfit first?" As she stepped through the portal herself, she answered, "If you don't, I will." A tall man in a black cloak with red clouds rose from the ground as the final member of the group passed through the portal. Two yellow eyes gleamed through the teeth of the Venus flytrap that covered his head as he approached the portal. It seemed to push him away, denying him access. The plant man's eerie voice said, "Interesting. The leader should know of this." The man vanished from view as soon as he sank back into the earth. Country of Rice. The Nidaime Otokage's patience may be tested by a few things. One of his top few is an experiment that keeps going wrong, or an unruly subordinate who keeps making a fool of themselves. These two incidents happened today, along with two other more significant annoyances, and they were ground at him like peppercorn in a mill. Neither the snake Sanin's notes nor the experiments conducted on the cells cultured from Orochimaru's white snake corpse produced any significant advancements. It appeared that any potential powers he might have gained from the snake or his experiments followed him into eternity. Kabuto was extremely irritated that the experiments were unable to enhance the regenerative abilities he had developed from his own genetic characteristics. His attendant's incessant reports of the day's routine events turned what had been a minor annoyance into a lifelong disgust. It was a report about potential defections. If it wasn't about the issues with the test subjects, if that wasn't enough, there was also a report about Sasuke's new team's lack of information. He would have to find a new attendant and risk having his jugular vein cut if there were any more reports of the same thing. When the report from his spy in Konoha never arrived, disgust gave way to rage. He was a stickler for punctuality, as were his spy network members. A spy was never recalled for reconditioning after submitting a report that was late more than once. Such reconditioning would make the information extracting techniques used by one Morino seem like a day at the resort. However, It had been days since Konoha's last report. Orochimaru and Kimimaro would have been left in their current positions, and Kabuto would have dealt with this transgression directly if they had been alive. If he had an extra asset, he would need to send it into the village given the current situation. Since it had been 36 hours since he had dispatched his scouts to locate and retrieve the final item, anger evolved into malevolent intent. His desire to lash out, as Orochimaru used to do when he had any failures from his subordinates, increased every hour since he no longer had the object. Later that evening, when the scout came back, he did just that. Both the enormous power signature from the object and the approaching scout were picked up by him. His frayed nerves were somewhat calmed by the realization that he had managed to obtain that object, but the need to extract the scout's necessary pound of flesh persisted. A female scout with exotic proportions and a sensuous demeanor dropped into the Otokage's chamber and gave him the item. Kabuto was concentrating on the yellow crystal he was holding while she lingered to provide a detailed report on the challenges of obtaining the desired object. It appeared to have been crafted by a master jeweler because the crystal was flawless and each cut had the ideal shape and texture. The scout's report was not heard in its entirety. Despite his occasional nod and comment, he inserted a tiny thread of chakra into the crystal. In the following instant his vision was filled with a burst of yellow light. He reset his glasses and rubbed his eyes instinctively, then noted his location. The walls were composed of speckled gray granite and obsidian quartz in haphazard flowing patterns that always ended in a sharp spike or horn. There were enormous lava flows all around him, and the heat was almost intolerable. The ruby-red pumice walkway, which had no flat surface and made any walk along its length dangerous, was the only place to feel safe. Seeing nothing, he made the decision to explore, but a haze of black and yellow swirled before he could take a single step. It began to solidify into a somewhat mismatched shape. Its face was almost human-like, but it had pulsating yellow eyes and a conical chin. The skin had an eel-like appearance and was a light blue color. Along the side of its face, the black hair on its head twisted into ram-like horns. He could see when it turned its head that it was really one huge horn that looked like hair. The upper part of its hairless chest was visible through the ragged tan robes covering the upper body. Even the unusually long arms, which had translucent yellow tentacle wisps of energy scuttling about like eels, lacked much muscle definition. The tan robe bulged out into an oval insect casing, molding into a black hardened shell from around the location of a belly button. 6 prong-shaped appendages, which appeared to have steel-tipped tips, were attached to the casing. These appendages extended half a meter from the main body before suddenly hinging downward to plant into the ground. The creature towered over him and was about 3 or 4 meters tall overall. Since it might have been the crystal's response to his chakra probe, his first instinct was to use genjutsu. He muttered a simple kai and formed the simple seal, pushing his chakra through his body to shake whatever influence occupied his mental capacity. He looked up into the being's eyes and saw that it was smiling and beginning to laugh. When nothing happened, its laughter reverberated throughout their surroundings and appeared to reverberate off the walls, producing a spooky and terrifying sound. Even when working with Orochimaru, Kabuto was rarely afraid, but now he was so terrified that he knew he would have to run or perish. The being said in a regal but almost deceptive tone, "Have no fear, I am not here for you. You should be grateful, young Hanyu, that I am even speaking in your presence." He responded, "Hanyu? I am not some pathetic half-breed. I am Kabuto, the Naidame Otokage and master of the arts of medicine and science. I think I would know if I was some illegitimate child of human and demon." The words made him feel a little angry that he was being insulted. The beast gave a knowing chuckle and then responded in kind. It twirled the fingers in its right hand as though it could summon something out of thin air after saying, "Oh, but you are. Kabuto, do you honestly think that your regenerative traits came from some simple human? You most definitely are a Han. You see for yourself." Just as Kabuto was about to laugh at the creature's melodramatic behavior, a plain silver hand mirror appeared before him. He grabbed the mirror and examined his body, shaking the shock from his system until he saw his eyes. He would have ignored the creature's words because his face and hair looked the same instead of the usual white tissue. Blood-red tissue now encircled his eyes, pupils, and irises. The second change came to him as he reached up to touch his face. His skin felt more supple than before, as though it were composed of a gelatinous material. With a tone of vindication, the being said, "It seems you are now coming to the truth of the matter. Your regenerative abilities come from your demon half in my domain. It would stand that it would be more prevalent." Kabuto threw the mirror aside in frustration and gradually controlled his rage before he made a mistake. This being clearly had the advantage in terms of environment and information. He needed to use every one of his faculties if he was to obtain any kind of tactical advantage. The creature's self-righteous, knowing laugh returned as soon as that thought crossed its mind. "Do you think that you could gain an advantage against one of the 3 prime evils? Do you honestly believe you could best one of the rulers of Makai?" When that information was presented, Kabuto's mind was jerked in a lot of different directions. Once he had calmed down, he made the decision to take whatever information he could find. Are we inside the crystal right now? It continued the explanation by waving its hands demonstratively. No, the soul stone can only hold one soul at a time. When you accessed it with your life energy, you created a link that I was able to exploit. This is a psychic link between our two consciousnesses. Since my mind is the stronger, the copyright core is to my standards. My name is Ball. When we linked our minds, I accessed your memories and thoughts and still can. With his inquisitive scientific mind in full swing, Kabuto asked, so you already know what I am going to ask you? Of course I do. For your first question, your demon half came from one of the great seductresses of my realm by the name of Andariel. I believe your human Kasen was just one of the many bodies she used to inhabit before meeting her demise back in Sanctuary. You have some of her latent abilities as well as a demon's regenerative capabilities hidden away in your blood. She loved to make poisons and mess with human anatomy, so I am not surprised at your skills in that area. At first, Kabuto believed that the idea that he was some sort of half-breed would disgust him, but when he saw all the gifts his latent blood had already given him, he grinned and took great pleasure in it. Kabuto got his most crucial question out of the way before Ball could say anything else. What do you want from me? No great being ever talks to someone lesser in stature without some need. Ball's face lit up with a broad, menacing smile. Very perceptive. I am pleased that I was found by someone of your intelligence. Since you were Hanyu, I guess I can leave you in charge here in this realm. Leave me in charge? That only means you plan on conquering this realm for some goal of yours? Kabuto responded quickly. With a sweet evilness that would have made Orochimaru soil himself, Ball responded, correct again. The goal is quite simple. Remove the forces of light here in this realm and use this as our outpost in the long march to knock down Kami's celestial palace. My sire was nothing more than a fool willing to play the game. I prefer to just forget the rules and take everything. Kabuto could handle working in this Ball's shadow because he understood the purpose and was going to be made ruler of this realm. He hoped the response would give him some opening to gain control of the conversation. It still doesn't answer what you want from me. How much can you do from this soulstone? He asked. Sensing this, Ball snuffed out the idea by encircling the Otokage with one of his energy tentacles and lifting him to eye level. Understand this, puny Hanyu. I may have been bested before, but each of us three gained from the Worldstone cross me, and you will not be anything more than a disemboweled carcass that I am sure a few demons would not mind devouring or deflowering while you are still conscious. Now this part is done. Get out and get me a worthy body, and maybe I will reward you with the knowledge you seek from that snake. Kabuto was suddenly jolted out of his reverie and brought back to reality in front of his face. The female scout was frantically waving her hand. Kabuto swiftly grabbed her by the neck and sent chakra to her brain's pleasure center through her spinal cord. Reason and restraint vanished like leaves in the fall against a fierce wind. With a sudden burst of energy, he used chakra restraints to lash her wrists to his throne and began chopping her clothing off her body. A few seconds later, Kabuto's servant entered. He started to leave after realizing the woman was tied up and only wearing her bra and underwear, but his master stopped him with a raised hand. Have the rest of the test subjects rounded up and placed into the combat room, then lock the door. Tell them to fight to the death and have the survivor healed and in my presence when it is over. Until then, I will be pleasantly occupied. The Otokage ordered his attendant to leave. Once the individual had departed, he extracted his pound of flesh and put the crystal in a jar. Country of waves. It wouldn't be out of place to see two people relaxing at the dock and gazing up at the clouds at any other time. The scene would be typical if they were in Konoha rather than Wave. Unfortunately, neither was true, which added to the scene's oddness. The two teenagers were taking a respite from the events of the past week by looking up at the clouds to escape the stress of ninja life. The boy on the left would always gaze at the clouds. He used to lose all of the irritations he had accrued from regular interactions with some of his coworkers. His stressors would be carried away by the nostalgic bundles of water vapor and particulates on the wind that carried them. Now it only served as a respite from the terrible reality of his life. His sensei's celebratory meals at the barbecue restaurant were no longer there. Games of shogi would no longer be played with his Tucson or his sensei. He wasn't even positive he would return to his favorite spot in Konoha to look at the clouds beneath a tree. He could still clearly recall the moment he learned that the original Ino Shikacho trio had not survived. Rewind. Wagon after wagon and person after person stumbled through the blue luminescent portal that appeared, and those who remained behind watched. When Team Guy and Team 8 initially appeared, it was a relief, and there was hope that some individuals survived. Stretchers or wheelchairs would be waiting as the injured arrived, and ninja or helpful villagers would be there to transport them to the medical stations. The rest of Team 10 waited to see if any of their families survived. As the refugee stream began to slow down, none of the clansmen that Ino, Shoji, or Shikamaru desired to see were present, although a few members of the Nara, Yamanaka, and Amakichi clans did. Tsunade, Jiraiya, and Celine cautiously approached them as the portal closed and they passed over the event horizon. Knowing what would be said but not sure if they wanted to hear it, Shikamaru stood there as composed as he usually is. But his mind was racing with all the reasons why his Tucson hadn't arrived yet. He might have been on a significant mission alongside his two countrymen, Inochi and Shuza. They might have been escorted by another group of refugees. Each of them nearly backed out of asking the crucial question as they cautiously approached the Godem and saw her gaunt face from what had happened. Tsunade nearly cried as she surveyed the space that would now serve as their temporary residence. Remembering those who had fallen to give them the time to get this far, knowing the news she would have to deliver, she sighed as she caught a glimpse of the three shinobi out of the corner of her eye. She took a deep breath, put on her best act, and greeted the three of them. Just as she opened her mouth to speak, the younger blonde Kunoichi interrupted her with tears in her eyes. Ino questioned, "Where are Tucson and Kasen? I didn't see them come through. What happened to them?" No words were necessary when Tsunade hung her head and lost her confident expression. The first to respond was Choji, who collapsed to his knees and let out a primal scream. Ino threw herself into Shikamaru's arms while sobbing in public. Normally, the indolent ninja would have referred to the entire performance as problematic, but Nara, who was stoic, couldn't help but cry. Flashback end. The clouds are still here, at least, Shikamaru pondered somberly. I wonder if Tucson or Asuma-sensei is looking down on me now. The one person he never would have thought would be sitting next to him, staring at the clouds, was on his left. The blonde, in his opinion, was always too active to be merely gazing up at the sky. He had no idea that Naruto was also troubled by a lot of thoughts. He wouldn't tell the Jinchuriki how he really felt just yet, but he knew he was too close to losing more of the people he now called his family. The toad sage Jiraiya, the man he perceived as his uncle, appeared and felt as though he had lost 10 forge rounds. Tsunade, the woman he referred to as Bachin, was under so much stress that she had lost her omnipotent, playful smirk. Plans for retaking their home were not yet given any time because everyone was too busy tending to the injured or constructing what were known as temporary barracks. It left him with a bad aftertaste of all the struggles and tribulations he had experienced. This one was the most difficult to endure. I ought to have been present, Naruto bemoaned. If I was, we would still be in Konoha today. I'm fortunate that the people I've always cared about survived, but far too many people lost their lives or their freedom. Kit, you shouldn't think about that for too long, the great demon said. There are tougher battles ahead. In an attempt to divert the boy's mind from his melancholy thoughts, this was not the state of mind he needed for his container. The blonde simply closed his eyes and allowed his thoughts to wander to the location of the cage. Even though Naruto hated to visit the demon, he was aware that at the moment, this monstrosity was the only place to find answers. The seal area was usually depicted as a huge cage with golden doors and numerous pipes running along the ceiling. Even if he was able to reach it, Naruto would have been in a panic at any other time. But given what had happened in the past few days, this was normal. However, it's possible that he watched too many films and altered his opinion about how the seal ought to have looked. He went down the same stone corridor he usually used to get to the fox's cage. His route to the seal was illuminated by a few tiny lights that were scattered across the floor. A few moments later, Naruto saw a metal chair with cushions in front of a room of some kind. The wall was half a meter high and made of brick and metal. There was a barrier of some kind above that. He placed his hand on the barrier and felt a window's cool touch. He looked to the right and saw that the window was attached to the stone wall by a metal plate. There was a plain speaker grate in the center of the plate, with a metal drawer and a black button beneath it that was roughly the size of a sushi roll. He pulled out the drawer out of curiosity. It was deep enough to accommodate a few scrolls and extended to about elbow length. The blonde was startled when a tiny light appeared in the corner of his eye. He swiftly shut the drawer and assumed a defensive position. There was a basic desk, chair, and bed on the opposite side of the mirror. A variety of books, handmade paper, ink, and brushes were on the desk. A tiny fluorescent light on the room's ceiling provided the illumination instead of the animal cage Naruto was used to seeing. The place almost had the appearance of a prison cell. A man who, based on appearances, would have been a traveler rose from the bed. The man had a quick but well-built frame and stood a head over 2 meters tall. When he eventually stood up, he had unruly hair that was auburn in color and fell just above neck length. The man wore ruby-colored sunglasses to conceal his eyes. Even Guy or Lee would be amazed by the perfection of his teeth, which were barely visible due to the devilish grin on his face. A single toothpick that appeared to have seen better days hung teeteringly from the corner of his mouth. Although his clothing seemed to fit him, it was a little out of place for the time or location. He had the appearance of someone you would want to know but be cautious of spending too much time with because of his black jeans draped over steel-tipped combat boots, red t-shirt, black jean jacket, and tan snakeskin belt. The man walked to the cage, lowered his glasses with his right index finger, and gave a single laugh. Naruto saw the same eyes that tormented him in his waking nightmares when he looked at the eyes that were now visible. Those were fox eyes. red eyes with pupils that were slit vertically. The Kyuubi boastfully declared, "I hope my appearance is to your liking, young kid. I haven't been in this form for a few decades." A simple laugh took the place of the brief shock of seeing his tenant in a different form than his nightmares. "If you appeared this way, it might have been easier to approach you that first time." He received a simple nod in response to his question. "That is the point. You said you would rather not repeat whatever important information that I may have, right? Good, I'll give you the details of what you need to build and gather once you complete the structure and finish the preparations. Gather whoever you want present and make them follow the directions I give you." Naruto did what he usually did in situations like this. As the demon approached the desk and rolled up an artisan scroll he owned, he posed the most straightforward query with a perplexed expression. "Give them how? All you usually give me is chakra." The drawer suddenly launched out. He approached and discovered the scroll on the Kyuubi's desk. The blonde took the scroll, examined it, and scratched his head sheepishly. He raised an eyebrow and made a comment after noticing some ingredients that needed to be put in a small kettle for incense. The great demon threw Naruto out of the mindscape and said, "Don't worry about anything on that scroll. It is just an ancient method of connecting to one's spiritual and mental energies. Adding the dose of chakra will link all the minds. Now get out of here and get to work." The Kyuubi laughed when it was gone. "Maybe I should have said something more, but this will be more fun to see when everyone is in his mind. I wonder what that one girl will look like." The Tazuna's inn. After leaving his onsen, Neji dried off after putting on his new robes. He looked in the mirror and saw that the soreness and injuries from the battle just days before had disappeared. But a single reminder was still there. The mark that plagued the Branch family was missing from his forehead. His mind was filled with memories. The cause of the missing caged bird seal still stinging him. Rewind. Since the first group of fervent villagers began beating on the compound's gate, the battle had been going on for hours. Initially, the attackers were repelled by the guards and a few shinobi from the Branch family. After the third hour of fighting, Hiyashi ordered more men to the perimeter. As the numbers gradually began to overtake the defenders, then there were some screams coming from behind the villagers who were committing the crime. As his personal guard, Neji stood close to his uncle and directed his Byakugan toward the source of the sound. He witnessed something there that would live indelibly in his memory. Skeletal masses, missing limbs, and bodies of rotting flesh began to march on the compound. They were all armed with bows, old katanas, or sharpened claws. Two strangely shaped men were standing behind them. They appeared to be birds because of their beaks and sharp talons growing from their feet, but Neji could tell they weren't because of their clothing. Neji said calmly, gesturing with his head toward the two newcomers, "Hiyashi-sama, it appears we have been betrayed." Following his line of sight, Hiyashi saw the two humanoid monsters that began to direct the undead horde's movements. One of the two birdmen would raise its clawed hands as a Hyuga shinobi would repeatedly use Juken strikes to knock down an undead creature. The undead beast would then rise again with a wave of golden chakra. One of the brave Branch members was able to jump to the location of the Frankenstein-like monsters by forcing a gap between herself and the crowd. One of the two beasts performed a brief series of hand signals before a blow could be delivered, causing the Branch member to collapse to the ground while gripping her head. As the Hyuga woman passed away from severe brain hemorrhage, with blood oozing from her nostrils, ear canals, and tear ducts, Hiyashi and Neji could only watch in horror as the veins around them swelled and the other beast's black eyes began to glow. They watched in utter horror. With a swift motion of its hand, 3 flaming dragon heads materialized from the earth behind the beast, hurling a barrage of fireballs at a group of Anbu who had entered to support the exhausted Hyuga. Taking hold of Neji's arm, Hiyashi said, "It is time to go." Neji nodded and ran along the compound's rooftops, saying, "Grab Hanabi and Hinata and meet me in my study." Less than 2 minutes later, he met the two heirs, who were assisting in the protection of a group of children from the main and Branch families. He was standing in the clan leader's study. Half an hour later. Throughout the history of the Hyuga clan, numerous significant decisions were made. Here Neji realized a crucial choice needed to be made again when the current leader showed up, limping from an arrow wound and cut and bleeding from twin lacerations on his forehead. Hinata and Hanabi cried out, "Atusan," and hurried to their father. As I made my way to a picture that was hanging on the wall behind his desk, he waved them away. He opened the picture with a simple ox hand sign, releasing the seal that held the hinge in place. 2 large scrolls were then revealed, which he took out and gave to Hinata and Neji. Guy and Iruka entered the office through a whirl of leaves. Before anyone could say anything, they were both in good condition. Guy's spandex was ripped in 3 places, and he had several cuts and bruises. Iruka seemed to have an elbow fracture, as he was favoring his right arm. While watching the corridor for any possible intruders, Guy declared, "It is time to go. Hiyashi-sama, the Hokage, has ordered all clans to evacuate and gather at the academy grounds." The normally unflappable Hiyashi stood before Neji, sighed, and removed the young prodigy's Hide-8. Tying it around Neji's shoulder, his right index finger glowed blue-green after a burst of seals. Then, Using his finger to draw blood from one of the wounds, he traced Neji's caged bird seal. The seal smoked and sizzled as the blood touched it in a shower of green ash. The seal dropped from the teen's forehead. When Hiyashi finally addressed the three young Hyuga, tears began to trickle down their cheeks. Many of our clan has fallen and we must prepare for the worst. Neji, you are charged to lead the clan. If I fall, teach my two heims as my dear Otudo taught you. Flashback end. The Hyuga clan elder said those final words before Hiyashi was struck down by two lightning-charged arrows while traveling to the academy with the remaining clan members. When the death blow was delivered, he had just finished his final katen, which protected Hinata from a flurry of fireballs. He didn't realize how serious the situation was until he got to Wave and the tension had finally subsided. He was the new leader of the Hyuga clan, which had been wiped out. Only 20 capable Hyuga shinobi survived. In addition to the 24 children and pregnant women who made it out alive, the majority of that number were branch members who were already on Hinata and Hanabi's guard detail. Except for the two that were now those beasts he saw, none of the elders lived. A knock from the outer door interrupted him before he could linger in the moment. He gathered himself and went out to the main room, where Hinata was standing in the doorway, bowing slightly to Neji. Trying not to show her own grief and loss, she said calmly, "Neji-sama, the clan has gathered downstairs. It is time." He answered as warmly as he could, "I prefer you called me Nisan." Hinata nodded as best she could and smiled slightly before turning to leave. "Unless we are in the presence of the clan, of course." Neji remembered another moment as he followed her images of a prostrating Hiyashi-sama, a loudmouth blonde's words, and a scroll from his Tucson jangled in his mind. One senbon chewing chunin, and his words was the final thought. He internalized the thought as he made his way to the stairwell. "Perhaps when I am finished here, I will let Naruto-san know that the Hyuga has changed." "You're correct. Genma-san, the bird will eventually use its beak to pry open the cage door." Country of Waves. Naruto stood in front of the village he had seen on his first C-ranked mission years prior. The following morning, in order to make enough money to purchase bread at that time, children were either working alongside their parents or begging for food scraps. Trash littered the streets, and many of the buildings were dilapidated. It was difficult for him to believe that this was the same town when he looked at the busy village now. Men and women were going to stores full of merchandise, children were going to school, and the streets were cobbled with the scent of the sea. With a smile on his face, he acknowledged the assistance he and his team provided to this now thriving seaport. He began to stroll down the main street in search of a guide, sighing, "I guess there is no time like the present." Some of the locals noticed him as he went by and curiously began to follow him, all of them vaguely remembering his familiar appearance. After a few minutes, Naruto halted and turned to face the throng of people pursuing him. Naruto asked, his voice a little nervous, "Can I help you?" Before a teenage boy in a white t-shirt, tan cargo pants, and a fisherman's vest approached him, the group of women and kids were whispering to one another. The boy questioned, "You wouldn't happen to be Uzumaki Naruto?" Naruto grinned, embarrassed by the circumstance, and scratched his head sheepishly. "That's me. Is something wrong?" The hero of Waves suddenly realized what Sasuke had been concealing from the academy for all those years. Naruto found a few people who would be willing to escort him to the places he needed to go. After 15 minutes of being nudged by the younger kids, being begged by women of all ages and sizes, and getting numerous autographs. Unbeknownst to the blonde ninja, 2 sets of eyes watched him closely and recorded everything he did. The members of one group, Barrick, Anstrom, and Celine, were interested in the boy's soul and mental state. He answered all of the group's questions with patience, which made Celine smile. The ninja carried himself in a calm and occasionally playful way, and the druid nodded. Anstrom remained perplexed as to how the adolescent could endure the malevolent nature of the demon that resided within him, or whether it was a well-planned scheme to trick everyone into feeling safe. 3 young Kunoichi owned the other set of eyes. When Sakura learned that her parents had passed away, she did her best to console Ino. After hours of sobbing and reminiscing about their early years, the would-be medic Nin concluded that distracting her friend from the terrible incidents was the best course of action at the time. She prodded Ino for 10 minutes before she was able to entice her out by promising to buy her something fashionable. They encountered Hinata on the way out, who was still getting over the recent incident. The other 2 girls were reminded of their plan for their fellow blonde by the mere chance of meeting the Hyuga heiress, and they persuaded Hinata to accompany them on a straightforward makeover mission. Sakura was instantly transported to happier times with the 3 academy students, who were lovingly referred to as the Konohamaru Corps. As she watched her blonde friend interact with the kids who approached him when her teammate agreed to play ninja with the children, she initially teased him, but after seeing everything, she realized it was simply his way. He probably doesn't want any child to be denied the same opportunity he had as a child. Perhaps Naruto isn't a true baka, or perhaps he never was, the pink-haired medic thought. Thoughts were far more intimate for Hinata. He always treats people with such kindness, especially kids. He'd make a wonderful dad if only I could speak with him. At that moment, Ino decided to take the baka out on a date if her friend couldn't get over her shyness and take a chance. Ino wasn't the selfless or romantic type when it came to Naruto. She kept thinking about what colors would look best on him and whether she should get an outfit too. She may have considered how attractive her fellow fair-haired shinobi was, but she also knew how Hinata felt about him. Being the character that he was, Naruto was grateful for the attention. It was a welcome change from the mean spirits and hateful glares that most of the villagers directed at him. If only I could receive the same level of admiration from someone else. One of the villagers who chose to assist tapped his shoulder, interrupting his thoughts. Are you prepared to leave, Uzumaki-san? The adolescent wearing the fisherman's vest inquired. To split up the clones, Naruto sensed Hinata, Sakura, and Ino coming toward him and turned back to the gathered clones and villagers. Almost, Naruto formed his familiar cross sign, making 3 cage buncheons to pair up with each person he would be accompanying to stores. The children present stood in awe at one of the ninja's techniques. Take these guys to the stores, please. They are already aware of what they must seize. Feel free to ask them anything reasonable in the interim. The villagers and clones cheered and scattered to their destinations. Naruto turned to face his advancing companions and joyfully rushed the trio of Kunoichi, saying, "Ohio, Sakura-chan, Ino-chan, Hinata-chan. What are the 3 of you doing?" "Not much, Naruto," replied Sakura. "Seems like everything turned out nicely around here." Hey, he smiled warmly and said, "They've come a long way from what was here before." Hinata nearly lost her nerves and reverted to her nervous behavior around him when she saw that contagious smile of his, but she was overcome by curiosity and was able to mutter her question. "Naruto-kun, what were all the clones for?" He smiled softer and said, "It will be a surprise, but let's just say I am building something important." He met her eyes. "What is so crucial that it must be constructed right away?" From what Tsunade-sama said, I assumed everything was in place, Ino inquired. Ma, Ino, but we're going to need something special. The ones at a clearing by the bridge will construct it as soon as my clones here have the necessary materials. Naruto, you should first have Tsunade Shisho clear it up. Not wanting her friend to pull a Naruto and set up a ramen stand, Sakura lectured, "We didn't want to leave anything permanent when we moved the non-combatants out as soon as the Cage's ships arrived to take them to their seaport on the southern edge of Wind Country. It won't last forever. We're not going to use it until the Cage arrives, but it will accompany us." A faint echo of Kyuubi slapping his forehead in dismay at the blonde's misspoken words could be heard in the back of Naruto's mind as he said, "There's no use repeating information secondhand when you can get it from an inside source." The error was fortunately concealed by Hinata, who said, "If you are going to be too busy, Naruto-kuna." Before she could finish her statement, the orange-clad ninja waved it off. "Not at all. Hinata-chan, it's manageable for the clones. Do you 3 need anything from me?" "We're going shopping," Ino said, grabbing him by the arm before he could respond. "You'll thank us later, I promise." Sakura turned to Hinata as she watched the 2 blondes leave. "That's perfect, Hinata. Don't worry, we're also bringing you something." Before dragging the Hyuga heiress along to catch up to the others, she smiled wickedly and said, "I bet you will like the results." Amikager Pain rarely met in person with the other members of the group. Ever since the individual missions to capture the 9 Biju or actual Jinchuriki began, there had never been more than 3 Akatsuki in Amikager at a time, but the situation demanded that everyone be present. 3 of the Biju had been sealed into the statue, but at the expense of 2 of its members. Sasori was killed by the Haruno Sakura, the Slug Sanin's apprentice, and the Suna elder, Chio. Deidara was compelled to blow himself up in a futile attempt to defeat Uchiha Sasuke, who also defeated the Snake Sanin. Pain asked the team of immortals to bring back the crystal they found because, even though this might have been a favorable attrition rate, it would only make it more difficult to extract the remaining Biju if they were contained inside Jinchuriki, such as the Kyuubi inside that damnable Uzumaki. If the power source could increase their strength, then not only would the extraction process be made easier, but even capturing the beasts would seem insignificant. Zetsu had just left after briefing the leader about the events surrounding the fall of Konoha and the group of people helping them. Their portal ability was the most intriguing, especially since the Kyuubi container wanted to learn it. Adding such a jutsu to the blonde's ever-expanding repertoire would make him harder to capture. The meeting had just ended, and the only team not present was Itachi and Kisame, but that was because they were taking care of the Uchiha, who would be a nuisance until he was stopped. Ever since Kakuzu gave him the scroll, a connection seemed to linger between him and the object sealed within. A sense of longing and indomitable power oozed from the object even from behind its casing, and as the self-proclaimed god of peace, The urge to claim such power for his own means was ever present in his advanced mind for Pain. The temptation to begin his research on the scroll containing the object circled around, but remembering the past prevented him from losing his bearing and tearing it open like any gift-wrapped package a child would receive. He and his partner perspired through the display of inner turmoil, and the fact that Hidan remained silent added to the gravity of the situation. Kakuzu sat and watched closely as his leader struggled to control himself under the overwhelming desire the crystal object was pushing out through the seals in the scroll. Not even the pocket dimension that the seal created within the scroll seemed to slow down its power. They weren't the only two worried. Zetsu, the Akatsuki's master spy, who had a Venus flytrap over his head, stayed behind after he was fired, but only from a dark corner of the room. He used his Doden abilities to partially fuse with the floor there, which allowed him to be out of sight but fully observe the scene. Conan, the blue-haired beauty of the organization, was worried about her longtime partner. They had begun their long march to end war and suffering in the world years ago, and while using a superweapon to harness the power of the Biju might not have been the best course of action, her devotion and love for the man had existed long before he called himself Pain. It wasn't until it appeared that this object was attempting to influence him. The self-proclaimed god's eyes glazed as he took the blood-red crystal horn in his hands and pushed it into his forehead, and a burst of energy rushed out from the point of contact, knocking the immortals and Conan into the far wall. Stunning them, the spiky auburn-haired Rinnegan user snatched the scroll and unsealed it in a burst of movement. The evil energy washed over a lone man in an orange mask in another part of the compound, and his first instinct was to see if the sealing statue was stable. With a single thought, he vanished from view in one room and reappeared where the statue was kept, and as he placed his hand on the structure, he felt not only the energies of the trapped Biju but also their cries of agony. He sighed, thinking he might have to put on his childish act, and headed down the halls to the main conference room where they were meeting, knowing his keys were safe and that the only place that energy would have come from was where the rest of the group lived. He was viewed by everyone else as a childish brat who only seemed to hang around at Pain's whim. Only he and his confidant, Conan, knew that the man everyone else knew as Toby was actually the mastermind behind the Akatsuki. Uchiha Madara. For a man like him, who had spent centuries walking the land of the elemental countries, surprises were rare. Everything had been planned and executed according to schedule, from the clan's founding to his eventual conquest of immortality and the overthrow of Kami. The next item on the schedule was to allow the final two Uchiha to subdue one another so that he could have the lock that the keys were meant to undo. Regretfully, the scene when he entered the meeting room was nothing like what he had anticipated. Zetsu was hiding in the corner of the room, just peeking out from the stone wall where Conan, Hidan, and Kakuzu were lying against the room's stone wall where they had impacted the barrier. Pain had a crystal horn embedded in his forehead, and waves of red energy flowing off of him. His absorbed bodies, which he used as clones, were there, frozen in place as tendrils of the crimson energy pierced them. Suddenly, a greenish-blue smoke lifted from the bodies, and as it dispersed, the red energy also subsided, and the bodies that represented Pain as a whole began to mold together. The tendrils that snaked from each clone latched to a portion along Pain's spine, funneling flesh, bone, sinew, and fluids from the clones into the main body as if they were sucked through a straw. When Conan looked up, he saw that her longtime companion had completely changed. His eyes, which had been ringed in blue-gray, were now tinted to a pale yellow but still ringed. Only the tip of the red crystal horn was visible, but now it looked like a real horn. His skin took on a reddish tint and appeared scaly. The hair on his head thinned out. And then, as the new Pain finally spoke, a tiny smile that could have frozen over Mikai's depths appeared on his face. The first stage of transformation is finished. To the gathered ninjas, the self-declared Akatsuki leader declared, "Terror will reign again." Pain-sama, what are you talking about? As she prepared a jutsu, Conan asked in a worried-sounding voice, and Madara watched, trying to think of a way to turn the tide in his favor. Pain, that pathetic person who believed he was divine? His soul was sent to oblivion by me, the monstrosity answered. I am Diablo, the Lord of Terror and one of the triumvirate rulers of Hell. Black flames poured toward the new target from Madara's orange mosque's single eyehole before anyone could react. Who you are doesn't matter. As he watched the Amaterasu flames streak for their victim, the Uchiha progenitor declared, "You are not taking away any of my pawns without retribution." The Uchiha and Conan stood in utter shock as the all-consuming flame of Amaterasu struck, merged with Diablo's fire shield, and then vanished entirely as Diablo swiftly raised his hands and a ring of red and black flames encircled him. Zetsu turned to the two immortals and saw Hidan beginning to regain consciousness while Kakuzu remained unconscious as he watched Madara and Paper User engage in a fierce battle with Diablo. Seeing the fight, Zetsu's dark side remarked, It seems that this new development has caused a bit of a problem. As Conan's wave of origami shuriken failed to harm the monstrosity, the light half said, "Quite a problem." He stood in disbelief as the beast extended a clawed hand, and with that motion, a circular prison made of bone rose from the ground, ensnaring the paper ninja. A clang sounded before a clawed hand could separate her head from the rest of her body. Conan stood wide-eyed and tried to use any jutsu she could to free herself, but she was unable to mold any chakra from the prison, so all she could do was watch as her possessed companion ran to her with demonic speed. Scythe and claw collided in front of her, and Hidan stood there grimacing while holding his scythe tightly. "You will offer my god a magnificent sacrifice." Diablo let out a rumbling growl, but before anyone could strike back, a huge lightning bolt shot out from a blood-red tentacled beast whose only human characteristic was a single mask floating in the sea of blood. Zetsu arose and liberated Conan from her captivity as the Immortals and the Eternal Uchiha fought. Diablo the Akatsuki spy and the paper ninja watched the battle closely, noticing Diablo's bewilderment as each attack appeared to phase through Madara without allowing the ninja wearing the orange mask to counterattack. Diablo calmly walked over to the cage that held Madara, pleased with the outcome, and as soon as the confusion was evident, it was replaced by laughter and a pair of bone prisons that appeared to trap the Uchiha and both of the Immortals, as the one masked blood monster was reduced to a stain on the floor. "From the memories of this pitiful human, I am fully aware of you. I'm glad someone else felt the need to tear Cammy from her throne, but that's a job for my brothers and me," declared the Lord of Terror gleefully. "But before this realm can be used properly, I'll need all of your clan's pathetic eyes and those useless errors my father made regarding these two idiots. I'll let my corpse devourers handle you." Zetsu melted back into the floor, securing Conan to his back before Diablo could detect him with little other option. The spy went to Fire Country, where he knew the other two members were. Otokage, a tall, dust-colored man wearing robes with a hood over his face, sat on the Otokage's throne, gazing down at a kneeling Kabuto, and he lifted a hand to caress a yellow crystal that hung from a golden necklace around his neck. "Have we started making arrangements to leave?" the robed figure asked in his regal yet sickly insane voice. "Of course, Lord. Ball supplies have been gathered, and Orochimaru's body has been preserved. Could you tell me where we're going?" Kabuto gritted his teeth and said, "The master medic found it sickening to think of being in a subservient position once more. The last of my brothers appears to have woken up from his brief sleep before we pick up my other errant brother, Mephisto. We will be going there first. I have to give you credit for your abilities," Ball exclaimed with delight. "We will leave tomorrow night and will travel under the cover of darkness. This homunculus that you created held a few wonderful abilities that I will gradually mold into my final form once I am done with the transformation." Kabuto's thoughts followed a straightforward theme as the Lord of Destruction waved him off with a sense of longing. "My brothers, we will get back together soon so that the plan can start." Country of Waves. In a local dango shop, Mitarashi Akiri was working on her fourth bottle of sake while a plate full of dango skewers sat in front of her at the time. She was downing sake by the mouthful while staring at her root mask on the table next to the empty bottles. Memories and the consequences of one's actions can sometimes be the most damning thing in life. Her life has been filled with disappointments ever since she received that mask or even joined Root. She was disappointed that she was unable to do more to prevent the Kyuubi from attacking and that she had lost contact with her sister, particularly after learning of Orochimaru's betrayal and abuse of her. Nevertheless, none of that was as bad as the disgust she felt for herself knowing that she was the one who brought the crystal to Konoha. She picked up a dango skewer and began eating the dumplings, so engrossed in her thoughts and her misery that she didn't notice another raven-haired woman sitting at her table until she looked up and saw the one person she didn't want to see right now. "That dango is really good." After swallowing the last bite of the sweet dumplings and throwing the skewer into a trash can by the restaurant's entrance, Anko uttered haphazardly, "I might say it is one of the best I ever had." Within minutes, the waiter strolled over to the sisters, dropped off 2 bottles of Blue Label sake, and picked up the empty bottles to cart them off. Akiri grunted a little, took another long pull from her sake bottle, downed the liquor, and then slammed the bottle against the table with a loud thud. She waved to the waiter and put up to her fingers before grabbing another skewer. "Nichan, just like you," Anko remarked as he picked up one of the bottles. "You never go with anything but the best, so what's the occasion?" "It doesn't appear to be a celebration for that. Some men would have to be present, ideally dressed in loincloths." "Imouto, you know me." Between gulps of sake, the shrapnel maiden answered, "I always go big when I do anything. Are you going to lecture me?" After consuming a dumpling and chasing it with sake, the snake mistress remarked, "It would have been nice if you were around more." With a slight sway, Akiri said, "I know I was foolish, but I was under orders to remain hidden." "Stupid. It's stupid," Anko yelled, punching the table. "In any case, why did you visit that man?" I never paid much attention to factions or politics, she replied to her Imoudo. I just saw it as a way to get stronger and to help protect the village. All I knew was that the guy who recruited me was Anbu and wanted me in a special division. It took me years to realize what was going on behind the scenes. The scene screamed of someone trying to wash memories away in a fit of indulgence, and Anko sat and stared at her sister, but nothing she said seemed to explain why she had already finished 4 bottles of sake and was working on the 5th. The sake was Blue Label brand, made with ingredients imported from river country to a brewery in snow country, which took twice as long to ferment their brew to create the most flavorful and potent sake around. Breaking the younger out of her reverie, the elder Mitarashi said, "In the end, it didn't help me to see past the blind loyalty I built up to Danzo-sa. I didn't see the mistake sooner and trusted in him to handle that crystal. Because of that, Akiri said haltingly, then gulped down the remainder of her sake bottle and slammed it to the table with a hand that was shaking. She blindly followed Orochimaru out of respect, admiration, and even love to some extent, but all that remained of her was being thrown away like the evening trash and used as an experiment to perfect one of his curse seals granted. It wasn't the same as bringing something that led to the loss of so many lives like Akiri's retrieval mission, but it was the same kind of pain Enko realized in that brief moment of unleashing torment that her sister was truly going through everything she did. In an attempt to be as consoling as possible, the snake mistress answered, "At least I am still here, Akine." Before biting into a dumpling, Akiri sneered, "I suppose I could return to covering for your sorry ass." "I'll have you know my ass is definitely not sorry," Enko said, pouting after standing in a mock indignation. "Ask any man in the area in every elemental country, people adore my ass." Her sister stood up too, unable to contain her laughter. "That is just because they haven't gazed upon mine." Enko scowled at her, then saw Kakashi enter the room, and both of them leaned over to emphasize the subject of this small competition and joke. Enko cooed, "Oi, One Eye, who has the better ass, my Nichan or me?" The famous copy Nin fainted without fanfare, a trickle of blood staining his mask under his nose. As any self-respecting pervert would do when confronted with a huge dose of sex appeal, Kakashi looked up from his book and noticed that each of their pants appeared to be taut over their shapely thighs, hips, and asses. After letting out a sigh and shaking their heads in laughter, the two Mitarashi sisters sat down again and gestured for the waiter to bring more sake, deciding to enjoy themselves with the poor boys in the establishment. Akiri smiled small for that moment. Arigato, Imoudo. The Tazunas in the barracks were solid. Everyone had shelter when they needed it. The mess hall and medical stations were operating at maximum efficiency, and for the first time in a few days, Tsunade was at ease knowing that the miniature Konoha they had set up was now on a paying basis. While the Konoha civilians were being prepared to relocate to Suna, Subaku no Gara, the Suna Kazekage, his siblings, and a platoon of shinobi were en route to supplement their forces. Baki, Gaara's longtime advisor and former Junin sensei, was arranging for their permanent shelter and attempted to persuade the former Jinchuriki to stay behind and allow him to command Suna's forces, but Gaara insisted that he had a debt to pay to one Uzumaki Naruto, and no one would stop him. With everything going on, the Godem Hokage decided it was time to unwind in front of a fireplace with a nice bottle of Blue Label sake. Before she could set down the first sake saucer, she heard a little coughing sound coming from a chair to her left. A blonde shinobi turned to face her and said, "You know, Ba-chan, one of these days all that drinking will catch up to you." She gulped down the sake with a groan. "You mean that eating all that ramen will make you fat someday, Gaki?" He huffed out his response while crossing his arms, saying, "I'll have you know that ramen is the best food Kami could provide." "Kid, I wouldn't say that." The always amiable Kyuubi smirked behind his cage and remarked, "It wouldn't hurt to have a nice thick steak and some veggies once in a while." "Stop talking, Baka Kitsune." With a cheeky smile, Tsunade said, "I could tell Tazuna not to let any of the stores sell you ramen." "You wouldn't?" With the most astonished and terrified expression the Hokage had ever seen him display, Naruto yelled. "Give me a try. What's bothering me now?" She turned back to the fire and asked. After calming himself with a breath, he finally got to the point, saying, "Someone wants to share information with us." He patted his stomach to let her know. "I understand." After taking a sip of sake to calm herself, Tsunade said, "I was wondering when the fox would explain what he would mean by upsetting the balance." The very notion that the great Kyuubi no Yoko was worried about world events was cause for concern. In an effort to convey the gravity of their enemy, Naruto said firmly, "I am wondering about that as well, but from what little he told me so far, it is that the beings in those objects were the rulers of Makai and are bent on conquering every realm of creation, including burning down heaven's gates and destroying Kami." She gestured for him to go on, but all she got was a shake of his head, and the worried expression in the blonde Hokage's eyes showed how seriously she was taking this. The Baka prefers to provide the remaining details in person, so I don't currently have any additional information. Fortunately, I concur. He tells stories better than I do, complained the Jinchuriki. Are you sure you're not letting him go? Tsunade asked, her concern evident in every word. Not at all. Even if I wanted to, I couldn't let him go. Naruto pointed to his head and said, he actually wants us to meet him at his place. Before Naruto became enraged, the Godem laughed at that gesture and kept laughing. Enough, Ba-chan, it's not that amusing. Wiping away a stray tear, she said, yes, it is. I know there is empty space up there in that head of yours, but we can't all fit in there. Very humorous. I forgot to laugh because it was so funny. Why do you keep making fun of me? Naruto pouted in response. Oh, stop it, Gaki, it was merely a joke. Would you mind explaining to me how we will all approach the fox? Tsunade considered everything and didn't see how anything too bad could happen, but she decided it would be best to have some medics ready just in case. Naruto explained the construction of the sweat lodge and its purpose in detail, including what ingredients were in the incense and what would happen as explained to him by the Kyuubi. Before she could agree on anything, the blonde genin made a request. Looked into the fire, Naruto said, I would think it would be best that not only those that need to know be there, but my friends should be as well. Are you certain about that? The Godem inquired, worried about what might occur if people his age found out about what he had imprisoned. Sakura's handling of it did not guarantee that others would. Before he sighed, he said, they should know, especially if any of the three would recognize his scent on me. Also, being with Ino, Hinata, and Sakura today, I realized that I might not get another chance to. Naruto concluded, recalling how he could sometimes tell that Hinata and Ino were using the shopping trip as a diversion to hide their pain because they both lost family, and since his friends were the only family he had, he felt it was time to open up. Additionally, what were you doing with three attractive young women? Did you not do anything that Jiraiya would have done? She cracked her knuckles and asked. In anticipation of one of her powerful blows, Naruto hastily ducked under. No, all we did was go shopping. Sakura and Ino said it was time for me to buy a few new clothes. Is that all? Why do you not wear it right now? Tsunade raised an eyebrow in question. Turning slightly away, Naruto said, I was going to save it for when we met the fox, or maybe if I ever have a date. A date, eh? When you went shopping, did you find anything you liked? With a playful tone, she asked. Nothing. With a quick shout, he said, I saw nothing. Can we now return to the question I posed? You are too easy to tease, Naruto. Tsunade chuckled. Other than the people I bring, I'll let you choose who you want to invite. He will be present because Gaara will be here tomorrow. Make plans to have Jiraiya, Yamato, a few Anbu, and all of the Junin senseis. I suppose I should be happy that it can accommodate so many people. Before rushing back up to his room, still flushed, Naruto said, now, if you will pardon me, I will have to get more details about that shopping trip later. Maybe Naruto is growing up, even if just a little, the Godem said, laughing at the genin's response before adding more sake to her saucer.
So that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel for more awesome stories like this. Thank you. See you all in my next video.